and ever-changing bills, and computer terminology, Commodore news. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Yes, the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Yes, the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? Yes, the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? Yes, the Commodore is keeping up with you.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Zapped to the Past. I am Adrian Mills and I'm joined as always by Mr. Graham Raddings. If you have not listened before, this is a podcast where we discuss games that were released for the Commodore 64. Last week we looked at our second batch of games from issue 28 of Zap 64, which we are in no way affiliated with, and were delighted by Defender of the Crown, maddened by Magmax, and turned off by Twin Tornado. This week we conclude our look at the games in August 1987, along with a special snippet from one of our Patreon-only releases. So Graham, tell us what we have going on in this episode.
In this brand new 24-hour gym with angry dumbbell-dropping man-babies, overly aggressive spine-popping deadlifting teenagers, glute-exploding squat-lifting she-hulks, and a peculiar smell of urine, ammonia, and protein-powered eggy farts of an episode. We sneak about the high-res rooms of Blacktooth, trying to cause an interplanetary isometric revolution in the clever tag team world of Head Over Heels, go on a blocky, badly made left and right scrolling runabout in the shoddy duo-only arcade conversion catastrophe of Quartet, and read the boring electronic book, listen to the weird audio tape, and then shout expletives at the uncontrollable game turd burger challenge of the Gobots. We also strap ourselves in as another top-down shoot-'em-up attempts to take a massive dump on our self-confidence with the arm-chewingly difficult Hades Nebula, polish our 8-bit crash helmets and look shifty before jumping on our whistle-powered motorbikes for an angular race in max torque, before ditching our Wasp-O-Matic bikes altogether and heading to the weird world of 8-bit comic book publishing for some unusual multi-game action with the piggy-fused Oink. If that superset of dumbbell arm curls hasn't given you enough muscle pump and you feel like dry scooping some protein powder might be the way to maximize your hulky gains, we dive into our best robotic bomb-spewing spider egg on a mission to kill some flies and bees in the outright bizarre Amaurote. Head back into arcade land for some proto-endless running and jumping in the interesting Metrocross, float around the dull rooms and explore the locked doors of a spaceship looking for something to actually do in the mind-numbing Rasterscan, before finally stepping into yet another arcade conversion and yet another top-down shooter, this time with an odd array of downgrades in the weirdly titled Slap Fight. There are some nasty arcade conversions in that lot. It makes me think of those times when you'd see a used condom on the ground in the local dog walking park. Who did that and why is it there? Thankfully, we may never know.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Cool beans.
Yes, cool. Cool beans.
Cool beans.
Cool beans.
Yeah. We normally stick this. I'm just going to stick this bit right at the beginning, actually, because normally we stick it at the end, and I'm thinking that people turn off by then. We have a Patreon, as we've said. If you wish to sign up for the Patreon, let's just get it out of the way now, and I'll probably say it anyway. So we have a Patreon. There are 2 tiers. If you wish to donate like a quid, or the equivalent of a quid, then that's grand and keeps us going, and that's cool. We really appreciate that. There's a higher tier, which is the price of a pint of beer roughly, and that gets you access to our Discord and things like that. And the special Patreon, you'll hear a snippet from one of our Patreon only releases in the middle of this, and you'll hear the full version. You get the episodes early, Discord, there's all kinds of stuff, weekly challenges, it's going on, there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's crazy, good stuff.
It is.
If you don't fancy doing either of those things, then could you take a minute or so just to rate and review us on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google, wherever you're listening to this? Because I know Graham always says at the end, it helps us somehow. We're not sure how, but there's an algorithm somewhere that's cranking those numbers out. And when you put a review in, as long as it's a good one, it goes, yeah, we pushed that podcast up. Or something like that. I'm imagining that the algorithm speaks like that. I'm hoping it does. In my head, they all speak in different tones, and they have conversations with each of these algorithms.
Completely different languages by the sound of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they speak in tongues.
The language of algorithm. Algorithm. Even I can't even say it.
Algorithm. There's no
Is it algorithm or is it
No, it's algorithm.
It is an algorithm, isn't it?
Yes.
God damn this world.
But anyway, if you could do that, it would be great for some reason, because then people would see our podcast pop up elsewhere and things. I might listen to us and whatever. I mean, they'd obviously have to have an interest in Commodore 64 games. So, it's not a niche audience, but it's our, it's us guys, isn't it? So, but if you could do it, that would be cool. Anyway, there you go. That's that out the way. You got anything to add to that? I don't think you have.
No, I don't.
All right, cool. There you go. I usually say that at the end, but I thought I'd get it in now. Right, let's crack on. We've got 10 games this episode, rounding off issue 28, August 1987. So let's crack into them with the first one. And this was a big one. It is a very big one. It is the first gold medal of the year. The first. I can't believe this
medal
is the first gold medal of the year.
No, I can't.
It's crazy. So, Graham, were you head over heels with Head Over Heels?
Head Over Heels is actually... There's a whole load of interesting stuff about this. There's loads written about it. It's one of those games that's been converted to pretty much everything. It scored massively high in almost every magazine, Zapped, Crash, whatever the Amstrad version was. What was the Amstrad? Was it Bang? Anyway, whatever that was.
Antics.
Antics, of course it was.
Antics, yeah.
So let's just get the credits out of the way. So the creator of Head Over Heels, or the creators, are John Reitman, and Bernie Drummond. So they created the design the game. It was produced by DC Ward. It was published by Ocean. It was coded for the C64 by Colin Porch. Interesting chap. There's a good interview with Colin Porch in the Ocean history book, where he actually talks about his experience with coding Head Over Heels. And I'll come to sort of a little bit of that later. I'm not going to go too far into that, but it's coded by Colin Porch. Title screen, Jane Lowe, and the musician, Peter Clark. Peter Clark, everyone. Peter Clark. Hi. So there's your credits. Head Over Heels is actually the second isometric game designed by John Reitman and Bernie Drummond, because they did a game that never came out on the C64, which was the isometric Batman computer game. It's not called isometric Batman, because that would be, that'd be stupid. That would be just stupid.
Yeah, although the new film really Batman. Weird.
Isometric Batman. He's looking left. He can't get
the
a spin.
Isometric
Anyway.
Batman.
Exactly. The light can only shine at certain angles in the sky. Anyway, that was released back in 1986. So, Head Over Heels then. What's it all about? Let's just go into the story. Now, before I dive into too far, this is a lot to cover with Head Over Heels, because there's a lot to it. I've summarized this as best as I possibly can, and we'll sort of go into the mechanics in the games first. But the Blacktooth Empire consists of 4 worlds. That is Penitentiary, Safari, Bookworld, and Egyptus. It's actually 5 technically if you add the world of Blacktooth itself. But that's the evil, despotic 5th planet that is actually completely controlling all the other planets. So it's an enslaved empire, the Blacktooth Empire. The slave worlds are all unhappy, but they live in fear of the Blacktooth rulers. And they all lack the leadership on their own worlds to gather enough momentum for an uprising. It just sounds like they're all, content to be overruled and beaten down. Blacktooth itself is equally controlled by some nasty leaders as well, and there are no revolutions as such on the cards at all. So people in the neighbouring star galaxies, so it's just everyone's kind of repressed.
Any revolutions on the cards? But no, I've got nothing planned.
No, it's nothing planned. We don't have the leadership.
No.
And to be fair, no one can be bothered. So the people of the neighbouring stars, or the neighbouring star galaxies, are getting worried about the signs of military expansion from Blacktooth. And so they've sent a spy from the planet Freedom, or spies from the planet Freedom, to see if they can push the slave planets into full rebellion by finding the lost crowns and then returning them back to their original planets to inspire them to become less, lazy, and more, active.
Be a bit more revolutionary, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So look at his crown.
Go all Che Guevara on their ass.
Seeing that crown's making me think about revolution. And it would, maybe that's how it works. Anyway, so the creatures of freedom, the planet Freedom, are very strange in that they are formed from a pair of symbiotic animals that have adapted to operate either independently or to their mutual advantage. So they can join together as one. Hedus Mouthian, or head, and can be saddled on Footus Undarium. That's heels. That's their names. And that is actually their name. And they're both highly trained spies. And so Head and Heels, who you're going to play in the game, are sent to Blacktooth to try and instigate the rebellion and do all that stuff. However, the plan goes immediately wrong and they're captured and separated and imprisoned in the castle headquarters of Blacktooth. Your job, once the game starts, is to get them out of the castle and to the marketplace so they can join up again. Once they've joined up, from there you can journey to the moon-based headquarters, where you can decide at that point whether you escape back to freedom or become a true hero and teleport to the slave planets, search for the lost crowns, and overthrow the dictatorship. To overthrow that dictatorship and any of the slave planets would be a massive blow to Blacktooth, and you could return to freedom in all of your glory. The populace of Blacktooth are so heavily oppressed that they would have to see all 4 of the slave planets revolt before the Blacktooth crown could cause an uprising. So you've got to do and get the crowns for all 4 of the worlds before you can tackle the Blacktooth planet. This, of course, would be the ultimate accolade, but unfortunately, and in this game, it's almost certain suicide. So, in this game, you've got to control the 2 characters, Head and Heels, instead of just one, and each has different abilities. So Head can obviously jump higher than Heels, control himself in the air, and fire donuts from a hooter. And we can all do that.
I'm doing it now.
And that enables him to be able to paralyze enemies. Heels can run twice as fast as Head. He can climb certain staircases that Head cannot, which is odd since he can jump. And anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's forgo that. And he can carry objects around in his bag because he's the bag carrier. He's the one with the bag. So you get the idea. Head can do stuff. Heels can do stuff. They start separately in there, and so you've got to try and find a way of getting them back together. So the abilities become complementary when the players are combined when you combine them. And that's normally after completing about 1/6 of the game. So you don't even get really to play Head and Heels together till quite a way in. The game offers unique gameplay, complex puzzles, and there's over 300 rooms to explore. It's a big old game. The games often contain puzzles and challenges, some with enemies, some with bonus items. You can collect bunnies in this game, and each of those gives you additional abilities like jumping higher or running faster, if that's to chance who you pick those bunnies up with. If you pick up the running faster one as Head, it doesn't work. Likewise, if you do it as Heels and you get the other one, it doesn't work. If you're paired at the time, so if Head is stood on Heels' shoulders, if you pick up the bunnies, if you stand on his head, it applies to you both. So if you get the bunnies, they actually give you both of those things at the same time. You can also get ones that give you extra lives and invulnerability. So it does depend on which character you are, or indeed if you've joined, how beneficial they are to you. There's also reincarnation fish that allow you to respawn from specific points in the game. You don't really kill enemies, and there's a lot of different enemies to go at, but you can't really kill them. So you can really just slow them down by firing lots of donuts at them, which you can pick up periodically from different areas in the game. You pick them up in boxes of 6. And when you fire them, it sticks to them and slows them down so you can actually sort of navigate your way around. So you get weird enemies like Daleks in there. They even use the word Dalek, which I wasn't sure you were allowed to do, but they call them Daleks. But one of them they have like weird different heads on top of Dalek bodies. Like there's one that looks a bit like Prince Charles, there's elephants, there's also homing droids. They're scattered around all over the place, designed to either annoy you, frustrate you, get in the way, or cause you to instantly drop dead at certain points when you touch them, which is annoying. So you can, as I said, Head can fire donuts, which you can pick up. You have to pick up both that and the air horn. So in order to fire the donuts, and then obviously that slows things down. Heels can't fire donuts though, so you need to be careful when they're separated. But he can carry things in his bag, of course, which is useful. But you can only carry things. You can't carry things from room to room, so you can only carry things in room. I would argue that's not a useful bag. Apparently, it's got a hole in it.
That's
the
a
bag
crap
with the hole
bag.
in it. Yeah, it's a rubbish bag. So So I don't know. Sometimes the little bits of logic sort of escape. It sounds like it escaped out of somebody's bag.
Bag with 2 holes is a tube.
The rooms themselves have objects that will kill you, platforms that vanish, a whole host of trickery, making your job all the more difficult. As you get further into the game, you encounter teleports that can take you between the worlds. You actually, oddly enough, start in prison, but there's a teleport right in your room. I'm not sure quite who put that there or why. Seems counterproductive to imprison people in rooms with teleporters, but what do I know? As I say, as you get further in the game, you'll encounter more of those. You actually need to navigate them in order to go between the worlds. And if all that, like I say, all that seems too much, you can just choose to escape, remember. You don't have to try and create the uprising. Each of the worlds that you encounter are differently themed, if you choose to go for the whole revolution mission, with more difficult enemies and obstacles. Each one has some really quite unique and difficult challenges, and you need to unite with Head and Heels on most of those to defeat the enemies and some of the problems that you're going to encounter. More importantly, the final planet Blacktooth contains the final boss, which is the Emperor's Guardian, and that allows you to complete the game if you manage to defeat them. That is apparently one of the most difficult things to defeat in the entire game. I suppose it would be, given it's the final boss.
You hope so.
So that's the game itself, the story and how it plays out and everything else. So it's an isometric game in that kind of isometric tradition, sort of 2-color isometric, similar in style. And if you imagine, there's loads of isometric games that, for some reason, every single isometric game literally escaped my mind when I was writing all this. But if you imagine like that kind of Great Escape, that kind of Nosferatu, that kind of high-res isometric look that you get. Now, this doesn't scroll in this game. There's no scrolling in it. It's all single-screen rooms in that isometric tradition.
Yeah.
So at least you don't have the horrible juddery scrolling. So this is kind of a flip screen game. So no jerky scrolling. That's a plus. Each room is, I think, exceptionally well drawn in the way that Nosferatu has that kind of high-res detailing that goes on. And your rendered characters are controlled with a joystick and with some limited keys as well, particularly, obviously, the key where you can switch between head and heel, so you can switch between them as you play, which is quite nice, the way it works. Quite quick-ish. It's one of the faster isometric games on the C64. Now, that isn't saying a lot, because it's faster, but it's not the fastest. And I didn't get massively far into it. I did actually go and play this for quite a bit, but I didn't get so far into it where I encountered massive frame rate issues. I just would expect them to exist. I don't think there's a way that this game could have been done without encountering them at some point, somewhere. The more you have on the screen with these kind of games, you know for a fact that there's going to be some kind of frame rate issue somewhere. Now, they make a point of saying in the Zapped review that it doesn't have any of that. It's amazing. Fastest game so far. Isometric brilliance. Finally, blah, blah, blah. I get all of that. But if you ever go and play the Spectrum or the Amstrad version, I can tell you the Commodore 64 version is by and far the slowest. The other two are like grease lightning, especially when you play Heels, who runs fast anyway. It's not terribly slow on the C64, but it's nowhere near as optimized as it is on those other platforms. But the processor's slower on the C64. You'd have to expect it, wouldn't you? So it was, compared to the other versions, namely the Spectrum and the Amstrad, the C64 is outperformed. The play area is quite big. Both head and heels are quite cute, if that is your idea of cuteness. You know, it's kind of a face with a feet, really, I suppose. I wouldn't say they were cute, but I suppose they are in a game character way. And the whole game has quite a nice feel to it. It's kind of a pleasant game to play. There's no blood, guts. There's no Frankenstein, so you're not going to go 6 moves in and get crushed by a wolf or something. So it's kind of plays quite nicely. There's a nice feel to it. The sound is a bit overwhelming, as everything in this game makes a noise of some description. So walking makes a noise, jumping noise, falling noise, picking things up, death, respawning, teleports, even walking in a room, you get a little mini jingle. So it's orally diverse, and that can become annoying. You can mitigate that in the controls for the game, but if it's either going to get you screaming and running out the room in anger, or you just turn the sound off. But I don't think the same silent game of this type is really going to work. So I think you're just going to have to sort of, if you're going to go for it, 300 screens of kind of thing.
Did you try the middle sound setting? Because there's 3 in there. There's all of it, not so much, and then
I tried to put it on not so much, and I didn't notice a massive difference. I've been honest. Okay. So I was just thinking there must be a whole batch of sounds that I don't know. But I quite like. It kind of makes the game feel a bit more complete because of all of that. So you do get the mini jingles and stuff like that. As you've noted on other platforms, they were a bit faster. So the kind of the into the room and the jingle is kind of over with so quickly that it's almost, you don't feel bothered by it. The C64, because of that little slowdown in there, they do start to grate, I think, after a while. So the game controls well. It is pretty responsive. Like I said, I think the frame rate's going to suffer on the C64 if too much is happening. But it's bright. The game is quite bright and quite nice. You've got plenty to go out on the screen. It's fun. It's quite challenging. The arcade adventure stuff. Sometimes there's silly payoffs. So there's a little bit too many insta-deaths. A little bit too many trial and error moments in this. You get plenty of lives to go at, but there is a little bit of trial and error. So you'll go and jump off some platforms and they disappear from under you. And if you don't happen to know which direction you go, you're not going to make it. So there's a little bit of that. And you'll only maybe make these mistakes a few times, figure it out. Then when you go back to that room, you're going to know what to do. There's a lot of detail. There's loads to go at here. The puzzles in the game are not obtuse, but they can get complicated when you've got more characters to think about. And remember, you've got to play this game over all these worlds, and the whole game is revolution. Well, that's a big goal for a game with 2 little characters and 2, that's set in the screen. So if they're going to have criticisms of it, I think sometimes that the game idea sort of overwhelms the actual cuteness of what you actually are. So you're playing these cute little characters in these maze-type environments who have got to find 5 crowns to cause a revolution. It just seems a big goal for such a small kind of window into it. I don't know. Maybe that's just my take on it. But I don't think you'd ever be bored playing this. Or maybe you'd eventually get tired of the music and the sounds. But I don't know if this game's got enough to go at. Certainly for your avid mappers and people like that, they're all going to be frothing at the pants over a game with 300 isometric screens that are sat there right now going, isometric, So they're all going to be digging that. The opening title screen's really nice, decent music. The production of the game is slick. It's as slick as the other versions, but it's just a little bit slower. So it's easily the best isometric game I think I've seen on the C64 so far. If you take Last Ninja out as a different kind of isometric game, so of this high-res type, I think this is probably the best one of these I've seen. And I actually enjoyed revisiting it. Now, originally, I didn't think much to it at all. Way back when it came out, I remember all the furore of Head Over Heels, and they really were pushing the cute characters thing. And I remember reading the Zapped review thinking, this is 98%. This must be quite good. And when I got it, I was a bit underwhelmed with it. I think because I don't really generally like these games and I just don't dig them. So I thought I'd really give this a go because, this is the big, super best isometric. This is the best one. If you're going to like any of them, it's going to be this one. It's got at least got a little bit of the speed and a bit of the wherewithal. So I went at it in that manner, and I actually quite enjoyed playing it and revisiting it. I didn't go for its cuteness, and I thought the game story was too big for it. But right at its heart, there's a nicely designed game with lots to go at and interesting and cutesy kind of graphics and characters. And it didn't, in my experience of it, slow down so much that it made me want to throw my C64 out the window, which many of the other ones have. So I think this is a really beautifully constructed game, finally showing that the Commodore 64 is capable of some reasonable high-res isometric gaming. But if you were going to play it, as we said about many of these other isometric games, you're not going to play it on the C64. If you want the optimal version, I would suggest Amstrad, Sinclair Spectrum, and then C64. But of course, at the time, we didn't all have the opportunity to just go and buy lots of computers and just, I don't want to play it on this, Dad. Fine, here's a Spectrum. Try it on that instead. Don't have that kind of logic, do we? Benefits of modern thingies that we have, modern emulators, we can, choose which platform. However, I thought this was quite an interesting game, and it certainly was worth going back to, and I did enjoy that. So I quite like Head Over Heels, which really surprised me because I didn't think I would. What about you?
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add to that. I think I'm not into it as much as you are. They just don't do it for me, these kind of things. This is more interesting than what we've seen so far because of the dual control method and the two characters having different characteristics, so you can come at the puzzles in different ways, and you can sort of gauge your progression. You can just set off as, do you start off as head? I think you start off as head, don't you? It's doing the thing.
Yeah, you do. You start off as head. Yeah.
You start off head, but you can immediately switch to heels and just go off as him if you want. So I quite like that sort of freedom approach that you kind of do have, and that's nice. I think that's a quite interesting design decision for what is 1987, so over 35 years ago, whatever. That's really quite interesting. It's not as good as it is on the other platforms. I said that the ditty will drive you mad. It every time, especially if you get in a bit of a screen to screen quickly. It is. I was starting to lose my mind a little bit with that ditty going on because it is slow. Because of the nature of the game and the nature of the speed that it runs at. Now, I don't know why the music has to be... I don't know the ins and outs of the technical side of this, but I don't know why the music is also slowed down because of the game being slower. It seems weird to me. I thought the music would run at its own speed. Is that not the thing with the C64? I don't know, because I thought the SID chip deals with the sound and plays it at the speed it needs to play at. I don't know. Maybe it's my inexperience.
All takes CPU time.
Yeah, true, I guess. But I just turn it off. Whatever it's doing, just stop it. Stop it. I didn't like it. I didn't like that bit. The Amstrad version looked really nice in comparison. It's a really nice use of colour on there. Although I did find a post on thing saying the Amstrad looked ugly and the colours were all wrong. It's like, it's just Alien Worlds.
They are a bit odd colours in that.
They're weird, but I kind of like it. It's more interesting. Yellow apples. I'm all for it. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's not going to be a game that's going to float my boat totally, but it's not. It's like you said, it moves at a decent click, if not as fast as the other machines. The controls are quite nice. The puzzles are all right. The navigation for some of the screens, it can be a bit tricky in places, and when you kind of work some of the puzzles out, like with there's lots of sort of mechanics like within each screen, like with this there's the moving platforms, so the floating platforms. There's platforms that have conveyor belts on them which will move you and things of that ilk. You're trying to sort of navigate around. There's disappearing platforms. There's loads of different things to pick up. I didn't notice any difference in the bunny rabbits, whether I'm supposed to know actually. Is there a difference in them to know what to pick up?
I only ever picked up one set of them, so I wouldn't know.
I picked up one that allowed me as heels to go fast. No, it was heels? No, it was head, I think, going to go faster, which was weird.
Head won't go faster.
Oh, right. Well, it gave me some steps or something. Every time I moved, there was a countdown going down. Then I picked up another one that gave me some lives. I couldn't notice anything visually from a different...
lives or limes?
Lives. If it had given me more limes, I'd be all for that. I did get to the fruit. I got to the fruit and veg stall levels.
Yeah, the market.
Did you
got to the market. Yeah, I got to the market.
Yeah, I got to them. It's kind of turned weird. That's not what I was expecting.
Well, that's where you can join them together if you meet them up.
Ah, right, okay. And I think one of the things that you are bang on the money is that this doesn't need that overwrought plot.
No, I didn't think that.
It's strange because nothing about this game yells Trotsky, Che Guevara, Lenin, revolution, Rasputin, all that kind of stuff. Just don't yell it at me. I'm like, and I didn't know anything about that story. I went into the game just to play it as a game, avoid story. I know what I'm supposed to do. Collect stuff. I looked at okay, got to collect the crowns. It's a puzzle solving game. You can kind of work your way through it. You know, you don't need that much. But when you started spelling out that story, I was like, have I played the right game?
Yeah.
Because that's all very overwrought. And jaunty jingles and peas with face or dog balls with faces and feet is just not
weird.
Not the kind of thing for Revolution.
Surreal.
I don't know. It is a very strange game for very strange plot line. It's all right. I mean, I'm not going to, I don't know, I would never give it 98%. It's never going to get that from me, but I can kind of see why, because the design of it, I think, is very clever. And I think that's what sells it. And I think if all you had at 1987, this is the best isometric, you know, if you were looking at those other machines, and I imagine they were, because there were some of the other machines, you're looking at them going, oh, they're getting all these games and they're really good and they're fast and everything like that. And you kind of want it to. So I can kind of see that it's like, finally, we've got one that's almost there. Let's just praise it. It's like, okay, yeah, absolutely. It's all right. I'm not head over heels with it, like I said. It's all right.
Hey.
I'm more like shoulders over knees.
Yeah, I mean, just an interesting little detail that Colin Portew, obviously, who coded this, he basically was, when he was working at Ocean, he was one of the oldest programmers they had. I think he was 40 when he was hired, and he'd worked for software projects, I think, before that.
Right.
And then he'd also worked for Imagine. And he was basically shown the version on the Amstrad and said, you know, is this possible on the C64? And he was like, okay, well, normally these things are quite difficult. So he got the original Z80 code from the original person who programmed it and went through it line by line. And what you'll play on the C64 is a 6502 recreation of that code, pretty much logic line for logic line, which kind of explains why it looks and runs the way it did. He's obviously optimized bits of it, but I thought that's quite an interesting approach. He just methodically went through the Z80 code and just made a C64 version of that. And they liked it so much. And then he actually coded the ST and the Amiga version off his own back just for, I guess, for something to do. And Ocean bought them off him and then subsequently said, we think you should go freelance, mate. And he's like, I don't want to be freelance. You're freelance now. And that's true. Honestly, this is how they treated him. That's exactly how they treated him. They said, you're freelance now. And he's like, all right, okay, you're freelance. Oh, we don't need you anymore. Thanks. That was the end of that.
That's awful. What an awful company they really were, as we are finding out.
If you read into some of the stuff in that Ocean history book, there's the interviews, a lot of them seem to end that way. So,
wow.
Anyway,
God,
I thought I'd add that because
that's awful stuff.
I think given the parameters of what he had to do, I think Colin Porch did an amazing job with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He also did a couple of other C64. So he did Operation Wolf.
Did Double Take, didn't he?
Double Take, yeah. He apparently doesn't remember much about coding that, according to the interview.
That's because he got it from another dimension.
Exactly, another dimension.
What did he do when he saw it? He was so surprised he did a double take.
Hey,
anyway. I'm here all week.
So there you go. So there you go. Another interesting Ocean game, but it stuns me. Anyone work for them? You read. I mean, they've obviously got a lot of sway and licenses and stuff. The more I read into that book, the more you realise that this is a company that seems to really treat its staff terribly.
Yeah, I think the thing. I mean, there's no. You didn't hear anything about it, did you? Just kids going in, offered a job, and there was no internet for this. There was no like website to say the glass ceiling, glass door, whatever it was called. That was it. That website where you can leave bad reviews for your previous employer.
Oh yeah, wehateocean.com.
That's the one. Oceanrcrap.net. Oh dear. Anyway, we don't care. They don't exist anymore. What do I care?
No, they don't. No.
They don't. There you go. Head over heels. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's move along because the next one bloody well isn't. Because the next one is Quartet. Full pricer from Activision. It's another Activision arcade conversion, and it's a port of the Sega's 1986 four-player game, Quartet. Four-player, Quartet, the clue's in the name. So in Quartet, the arcade game, I suppose in this well, you can play as either Joe, Mary, Lee, or Edgar. They went to town with the names there.
Hero names, if ever I heard them.
Absolutely. As you attempt to rescue a space colony from terrorists or an army of robots. I found plots for different plots for it, so I was like, hey, you're saving something from someone, or whatever. Point is, what we have here is a game set of a 22 bi-directional side-scrolling levels where you just got to shoot everything that moves as you jump from platform to platform. So it's kind of a shooty platformer type thing. So think Contra, I guess. Is there something, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Platform 12. So you get to the end and you shoot the end boss who is holding the key to the exit. which allows you to move on to the next level and so on and so on. That's what you do. Some of the levels are on the surface of the planet and they have a blue background, and some of them are underground and they have a brown background. Some of them seem to be levels that are blue, but not sky. But the visuals in this are poor, and so it's hard to know exactly what that background is because they are very, very bad. In fact, saying this is poor is being kind. So whilst not the arcade game's not amazing, its draw was its 4-player co-op. So like Gauntlet, those kind of games were turning up at this point. So 4-player co-op blasting, which made it into a fun game, and hence the name Quartet. So there's 4 of you around the arcade shooting stuff, and that's a good laugh. Here we have Duet. It's only possible to play 2-player, so that's the game. The name doesn't stand up once you've only got 2 players. But it's not like you would want to really play this, as the issues with this game are many and varied. The sprites are indistinct and poor, all of them. From the player sprites to the enemy, they're all blocky, badly animated, and they move poorly. The end bosses are blocky monstrosities. There are power-ups, I think. You run over them, but they seem to do nothing as you continually shoot the same short-range characters all the time. When I say characters, I mean character sprites, character graphics. It's just that's what you shoot. The background visuals are terrible and poorly realised, and there's an attempt at a pseudo 3D that does not work at all because the platforms kind of end mid-graphic. The controls are rubbish with really floaty jumps that don't seem to really do anything, and the scrolling is too slow to keep up with the action. And quite often you reach the right or left-hand side of the screen, waiting for the scrolling to actually catch up with you. There's also horrendous, and I do mean horrendous, slowdown whenever you get more than a couple of sprites on screen as well, to such an extent that it drops into single-figure frames. And it's also really easy. There's no challenge whatsoever to just walk through the levels, and the bosses have prescribed patterns of movement, so they'll sort of move from point A to point B. So you could just stand off to the right of point B and or to the left of point A, whatever, and just keep hammering the fire button, and eventually they'll die and drop the key and you move on. It's stupidly easy. So crap, really. The music by Dave Whittaker is the only vaguely saving grace. It's all right. There's some nice tunes he's done. I think they're ports from the arcade. But this is a calamity of a conversion that is awful to look at and awful to play. This is a shockingly bad release that once again challenges the other shit conversions we've had for the worst port accolade. And I thought to myself, we may need a new category in this year's awards.
I have to say exactly the same thing. I'd have to say exactly the same thought.
The worst port award, we need to have that, I think, because I think that's going to be one of the hardest fought ones we're going to have this year, because this is truly awful. 15% it got, and that's being kind. Craptet, whatever, awful shit. What did you think? It's
embarrassing. It's an embarrassing thing. Everything about this is embarrassing. It's embarrassingly priced at full price at £10. £10 for this. Honestly, you have just been literally bummed. Like, it's red raw bummage. That
you've been rammed up the Quartet.
You really have. You've been quadded. It's utterly terrible in every single way. It's just terrible. I mean, I'm not. There's nothing to add to what you've said other than to just agree with you. It's very poor, badly drawn, terrible graphics, bad sprites, naff floaty controls. Enemies had no logic whatsoever. They're just there.
Yeah,
poorly
that's
created
what I mean.
backgrounds, lumpen gameplay. It's just dreadful, utterly dreadful. The fact that this was full price is tragic. The fact that it got 15% is tragic. I would have given this 0. This should be where, we said some time ago, I forget what game it was then, that they should reserve a 0 rating for the games that are truly, utterly shit. I think it was that Jailbreak game we said. This is just crap. Just terrible, terrible thing. So, I mean, the arcade is nothing brilliant. It's to go by either, I have to say. I never liked Quartet, but as you rightly point out, it was just a 4-player shooty thing. All right. But if you even at that simple level of 2-player version of that, the C64 is more than capable of delivering it. It's not doing anything so revolutionary and considering this is arcade hardware, this is actually low-hanging fruit in terms of what you could convert and how you could convert it. There's shoot-em-ups that are doing this much faster, much better. I mean, if you take out some of the logic, this is just a side-scrolling shoot-em-up. It's just crap. It's utterly crap. And I think it ranks easily as, if not the worst, certainly one of the worst conversions of arcades on this platform that we have come across in the whole of this podcast, and suspect may very well be one of the real daggers. This is the abdabs, the screaming abdabs of games. This game gives you the shits, and not in a good way.
Yeah, this is
just bad in every way.
This is a pan browner.
It is. And it's embarrassing. The first thing when I saw it, I'm like, what is this? This is just embarrassing. This is Activision? No. Cactivision is what it is.
I know. It's really strange, isn't it? I see what they were producing 3-4
did they
years prior to
hire?
this.
I mean, goodness me, who were they hiring at Activision? Did they go out into some courtyard at a junior school or an infant school? Some kids are playing hopscotch and hey, you guys, you ever thought about programming a game? Get on with it. Off you go. We'll give you all the, lollipops you can eat.
And then you freelance, and you have to wait for Ocean.
I don't know how this game came to be. I don't know how it came to. I do not know how they came to be. How it would pass any kind of quality assurance process of any description. It cannot have been playtested unless they were drunk, blind, stoned, or all of those things, and then thrown off a cliff. This game should not ever have been published. It's ridiculous. I feel sorry for anyone that bought that. I mean, I would hope that they didn't if they saw it, but it might have looked passable in screenshots, I think, from a distance, and when I say distance, from here to, Sheffield. So just
the lesser known follow-up to From Here to Eternity. From here to Sheffield.
I felt a genuine pang of sadness that a conversion of this type even exists on the Commodore 64. We've seen bad ones, but this is really bad.
Yeah,
really
proper
bad.
cacola.
Oh, goodness.
Let's spend no more time on it. Let's move along, because crapper.
Oh, it's stinking up the place. It stinks. Hopefully the next game will make it stink less.
Yeah. Graham, did you pass the challenge of the Gobots on the
challenge
Mobius
of
strip?
the Gobots? I said that's the extra bit. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. It's the challenge of the Gobots on the Mobius strip. Is that the full?
I think so. Yeah.
It's not going to help us. This is a Tony Crowther game, with music from Ben Daglish, and it's published by Reactor. Okay. So this also came with an electronic book, which details in great detail the story and the plot of all of this, which was written by Kay Blake and Al Goodley, and it has obviously the graphics and code for that even by Tony Crowther. So it came with its own electronic book. Exciting that it did that. So this is cool. Gobots, go Gobots, yay! So we should really discuss what Gobots were and are and were.
Go on,
because there's a couple of funny details that will give you a chuckle about this. So. Gobots is a line of transforming robot toys, obviously, produced by Tonka from 1983 to 1987. They were similar to Hasbro's Transformers, similar as a word. Although initially a separate and competing line of toys, Tonka's Gobots became the intellectual property of Hasbro, who owned the Transformers, after their buyout of Tonka in 1991. Weirdly, the fictional side of the IP remained owned by Hasbro, but the toys and their likenesses were only licensed from Bandai, so Hasbro could never ever use the Gobots later in their likenesses and the toys. They just owned the fictional stories of the Gobots. How weird is that? It's just weird.
IP law.
Weird. I know, honestly. So Gobots are kind of a weird thing. So this game is actually based on the Hanna-Barbera cartoon show of the toys, which was called Challenge of the Gobots. That ran for 65 22-minute episodes from 1984 to 1985. From 1984 to 1985, it ended in 1986. 65 episodes of this. I think I maybe seen one, and that's a good thing.
I don't think I've seen any.
So, okay. So the Gobots were basically a toy that was released to either compete or maybe they were even before the Transformers. Who knows and who cares? The game bears very little resemblance to anything to do with that anyway. So,
yep.
So the story: a weird planet called Mobius has appeared near Saturn. On this planet is the evil Dr. Braxis and his army of bad dudes. From this planet, Dr. Braxis intends to attack the Earth and kill off the Gobots, his mortal enemies. Handy that they all on Earth. In an attempt to trick the Gobots into a trap, Dr. Braxis has ordered his henchmen, Psykill and Crasher, to capture the Gobot companions, Nick, AJ, and Matt. So that's their human companions.
That's as good as Mary, Jo, Lee, and Edgar.
Who end up being transported to Mobius along with Turbo, one of their Gobot friends. So in the rush for Psykill and Crasher to capture them, they also inadvertently take a Gobot with them. Damn it. Luckily, before they were immobilized completely, Turbo managed to alert the other Gobots, and so Leader 1 and his sidekick, Scooter, immediately set off to help them. And this is where it starts to get stupid. Are you ready?
Yep.
So, for reasons that will remain stupid, upon arriving at Mobius, Scooter transformed into a load of clones, which double up as bombs, and scattered himself across the surface of the planet. Handily, and in the absence of ammo, Leader 1 decides to use these Scooter clone bombs to destroy all of Dr. Braxis' bases. So, you must fly around, pick up the Scooter clone bombs, and drop them on bases. Dr. Braxis has other ideas and unleashes Gog, Copter, and Crusher to thwart your bombing plans. which turns this nightmare of stupidity into a Defender-style shoot-'em-up. You can shoot the enemies, land and grab a rock, and you can throw the rocks at the enemies. You can also, once you've bombed enough of the bases, you can then call in a super bomb. It's just a bloody nightmare. So it's a Defender-type clone wrapped in all of that Gobot garbage. It's a bloody nightmare, this game. It's a bloody nightmare. It's basically uncontrollable. I mean, I do not understand what freakish crazy you would have to be on to instigate a control system that makes this game so unbelievably stupid. It's just uncontrollable. So there are parameters you can adjust, which is kind of akin to a skill level. But this game is supposed to be made for kids. Gobots were a toy. No one's going to want to start a game and play with the gravity and all these weird settings to try and control this. And there's even a really easy cheat mode in the game as well, which I think if you just type in "I love Matt," I think you get a cheat mode as well. I think the problem with this is that they realised very quickly early on that the game was shit and that nobody would want to play it. And even if you wrap this in Gobot pastry, no one's eating that because it's a pastry-covered dog shit. So it misses its demographic marks so extraordinarily. It's quite bizarre. I mean, for a game aimed at kids, it's too hard and it's no fun and the controls are stupid. For something that's aimed at Gobot fans, even with the electronic book and the weird audio tape recording it comes with, which is called The Challenge, and which is a really weird synth track, all links will be in the show notes. It's a complete miss for any Gobot fans that may happen to not be, age 10. So you're missing the point with your fans of the show. This game cannot be aimed at those people because it's uncontrollable. As soon as you start, the game, your spaceship just bounces around and hits things. You can land, and you turn into what looked like a Dyson vacuum cleaner, which is where you can pick up the scooters or the rocks and then throw bombs at things. Nothing about this makes sense in any capacity. And then as soon as you take off, you're going to be dead within seconds. So you can't control it. You can't do anything. It's just such a massive miss. It's forgettable but passable music as well. Ben Daglish isn't, this isn't his greatest work. We'll come to better stuff from him. This is not terrible, but it's just not very good. So bouncy controls, which make no sense whatsoever. Bad controls, some reasonable demo-ish kind of presentation, I suppose, and the graphics are blocky-ish and maybe they're okay-ish, but I wouldn't say so. So passable, maybe visually. But this is derivative of so many other better games that are cheaper than this as well. Just to this stupid nonsense. Take your Gobots, take your robots, and stick them up your poop chute. This is rubbish. And I'm pretty sure that's what was on his Christmas card after he gave that to someone as Christmas present.
He bought them the tape.
What about you? What did you think of Challenge of the Gobots?
Well, my first sentence says it turned out the challenge of the Gobots was just simply controlling them.
Wild Gobots.
Yeah, as the game is nigh on impossible to play or controlling any meaningful way. So yes, it's another Tony Crowther game that's lacking the basics of control, and no amount of secret menus and books and audio tapes or anything else is going to hide this. It is a nice bit of music. The visuals animation are okay on the main ship, the way it turns and stuff, some nice... They're all right. It moves at a decent pace because it's programmed to Tony Crowther, so it's slick, I guess. But the inertia on the craft is just painful, and it renders it unenjoyable to play and a chore to endure.
Absolutely, yep.
There's a nice idea here for playing along both the top and bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Which I guess is it's been nicked from Nemesis at this point. So you're combining that with the Defender-style wraparound gameplay. That's quite a good idea. That's sound... we'll take that.
Reminded me of Iridis Alpha did something similar in a sort of that similar. And didn't Kettle do something like that? Yeah,
but in Nemesis you get enemies on both the top and bottom, don't you?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking of that. And then if you wrap that into Defender, a Mobius strip it's a thing, isn't it, in space that loops back into itself. So it's loops back round in itself. So basically Defender. So
where time becomes a loop.
Yeah, it
becomes a loop.
It's that sort of. So I can see how they've tried to all this in. But if you can't control your ship and the bombs look like mobility scooters, then all the good ideas in the world aren't worth anything.
They do look like mobility scooters.
Yeah, they did. They look like mobility scooters. It's like at first I didn't know. Again, I'm like, I'm not looking at this. I'm just going to play it. So why am I picking up scooters as bombs? I just didn't understand it. But now you've explained it to me that one of the it's not actually just a misdrawn something. Clones. The turbo clones of something called Scooter. This is stupid. This has become more stupid the more I've understood it. So, this is anything. As you said, and as you guessed, I was going to say, no bots. Challenge of the no bots. just crap. No bollocks. No bollocks. Bollock off. No, rubbish. I hated this. Just couldn't control it. And it's not just that. You have to press those menus are hidden. You don't.
Yes, they are.
So you have to press. No notion to play. If you want the hidden menu bar, press F5. I think it's F5 and F3 to get the other one.
Yeah, that's right.
Just stupid. What a stupid game.
Absolutely
How
stupid.
hard
And
is
10
it to-
quid.
How hard is it to make transforming robots into a decent game?
Apparently, only Ocean have managed it once. And they
Did
didn't
they?
really talk about it. Yeah, because theirs is probably the only passable Transformers game.
It's
So
not
far,
very
we
good,
haven't
that-
looked at
that
it. No,
one.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. But it's certainly better than the Activision one that came later.
That's
And
true.
this monstrosity of a
And
thing.
what are those pictures you put in? We need to. I'll post these. What are they? Because one looks like someone's having an electric piss, and the other one looks like a robot is. Robot is going up where a Gobot's never been before to another robot.
Yeah, it's going up his go shoot. That one, I think.
Absolutely. Doesn't look-
yes,
doesn't
that's
look
from
too
the
happy about
electronic
it.
book. It's from the electronic book, which, by the way, goes on forever. It's page after page after page of endless dialogue and discussion and the full story of our. It does give you the full idea of what to do in the game. But
You're telling me that an anime has too much backstory?
Yeah, I suppose it is an anime because the Gobots are kind of based on an early sort of Japanese robot thing, I think.
Yeah,
so.
there you go.
But in the original Gobots, well, not the original Gobots, but the things that they're based on, they actually have people in them. Like, those giant mecha robots that are, the Japanese, some of the Japanese cartoons.
Is that what he's trying to pull out
Well,
in
no,
that
there
second
was
picture?
a decision. No, well, maybe a decision was made at some point for the Gobots to have an AI as opposed to have people in them. But no, who made that decision? I don't know. Someone at Hasbro or someone at Tonka, I guess.
Just go away bots. Just no.
I imagine that there was some kind of battle, a bit like that one in Star Trek between the CEO of Tonka and the CEO of Hasbro. In my mind, that's happening right now.
I bet 13 Quaaludes on the Tonka guy because he makes Tonka trucks and they are indestructible.
They are big, tough toys for.
I love Tonka
We
trucks.
can't
They're
say
right.
it now. Yeah, we can't say it now, can we? Yeah.
Why can't we?
Because they used to say big, tough toys for big, tough boys. But
Oh,
nowadays,
they did, yeah. Well, I mean, you can say it. It's just that's what it was back then.
Well, it just doesn't.
You can
You
say
can't
it's
get LGBTQ plus and all that to rhyme so easily. But
Well, anyway, there were big yellow trucks and I liked them. I never had one. I always wanted one, but I
you
never,
never had
had
a
one.
Tonka truck.
No.
I had one that I built a ramp and frisbeed it through the greenhouse. That was the last time I ever saw it. It just went-
Well, the greenhouse, because they're indestructible.
Yeah,
it
it's
just destroyed the greenhouse. Graham, what have you
Yeah.
done to the greenhouse?
It's still going.
It's been
That thing, when
tonkered.
once it hit that thing, it flew off into space and it's still out there. It's a bit like that Tesla car, just floating off. Probably somewhere near Saturn right now, just floating out there, sending back signals like Vija.
It's going to come back one day and look for missing whales. What would it be called? Actually, I know I'm mixing up my Star Treks, but it would be Tunk, would it? If they took out the vowels.
Yeah, took out the vowels.
Tunk
Yeah.
has come back. Tunk. What is
Something
Tunk?
tells me they wouldn't be overly worried about it if they just when it got right down to it, and never mind all the clouds. Once they got right down to the central core, there was just a small Tonka truck.
Yeah, but if
like
it
a
grown,
tipper.
if it had grown sentient and called itself Tunk.
I still don't think it's going to serve a great universal purpose, other than to really help you move, loads of dirt if you're excavating.
And
But
also,
you know
don't forget as well that thing in Star Trek 4 is coming back when the two whales die.
Space log.
Yeah, it's coming back when the whales die.
Yeah, luckily they were male and female whales, but you can't just put them in the ocean and expect things to happen. No,
Absolutely.
take them on a romantic dinner at least or something, Kirk. Damn it.
They're not like rabbits. Whales are not. You don't say, they're breeding like whales. That is not a common occurrence. Not a common
There's only
saying.
two of them. Eventually, they like photocopies. Some of the children of those whales aren't going to be so bright, are they?
I think Kirk just thought they were just like him.
I just think that the seventh generation of whales from the same family, they're just going to be swimming ashore. And why do they keep beaching themselves? Because they're stupid. They forget that they're mammals in the sea. They're really fast but stupid.
Instead of going wow, they go oh.
So then they'd be like, now we know why they were bloody extinct. Now we know why it happened. Never mind the space log. Just pretend we're not Earth. Next time it comes, they have to be Earth. Do you just say, "Sorry, you're wrong planet"?
In the 28th century, why do you say he's dumb as a whale? Well,
I just think the idea this space log's just coming through the atmosphere is like, just send it we're not Earth planet. Like, speaking of funny language, space log. This is not the planet Earth. You've got the wrong planet. This is a whale-free planet. Earth is 7 planets to the left. Off you go.
Space log. Anyway,
I digress.
Charge of the Gobots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we go.
What is it?
Let's move along. We've got 2 more left. And our next one is another full price. A lot of full price ones this episode. So we've got Hades Nebula, or Hades Nebula, how are we going to pronounce it? Hades Nebula. This is £10. I didn't make a note of who this was from because I don't care. According to the back of the case, though, there are 4 things you'll need to play Hades Nebula. Do you know that? 4 things. Number 1 is a craving for really fast-moving and challenging shoot-em-ups. 2 is awesome stamina in your fire button finger. 3 is A1 vision to appreciate the graphics. And 4, acute hearing to enjoy the Commodore music and effects, or the funny little bleeps on the Spectrum. That's what the back of the box says. If you don't believe those 4 things, then it commands you to demand a demo right now from your storekeep, or shopkeep, whatever, which I don't think is the best thing to do.
No,
because I'm not going to convince you to buy it. So anyway, Hades Nebula is another in the long line of vertical scrolling shmups we have seen. And this is one part Star Force and another part Terra Cresta. So at some indeterminate time, possibly in the past, maybe the future, Earth sought to find new energy sources by sending out a series of colony ships into space to find said resources. Cue the evil Emperor Hades of planet Sudini ambushing the ships in order to enslave the crew and sell the ships for scrap. So you can't have that, and in your small ship, you set out to save the ships by blasting your way through the Hadean fleet of ships, I'm saying ship a lot here, and stopping them from nicking your stuff. So basic plot, who cares? So the levels see you navigating various different coloured craft ships, spaceships, and you are set upon by various enemy fighters who arrive in various waves and let fly at you, so they're shooting like mad at you. You've got to navigate these and destroy them in a typical shoot-em-up fashion. So they come down in waves, you shoot, so on and so forth. There's also land targets to shoot as well, some of which will spawn power-ups to be collected. But be careful not to shoot them before you do, because they are destructible. So those power-ups that you can pick up are extra speed, lasers, power wings, side rotaries, front rotaries, sound crap, and tri-lasers. Collecting these adds bits to your ship and gives you various extra abilities which are useful and necessary, as this game is very, very hard. There's a lot of games this episode which are very hard.
Yep.
This is the first of them. Well, actually, no. Gobots was the first of them. This is another one of them. So this is hard. You're set upon by multiple random waves at any one time. So you don't just get waves planned. They're all coming. All of them, all the waves, all at once, it feels like. And a lot of bullets are fired at you, which you need to avoid. And this is not offset by your shot speed, which is very, very slow. And thus you do not really have the firepower to combat the waves coming at you. And it's a shame, really, as it renders the game unenjoyable and robs it of what could have been something quite interesting. It also slightly iffy in the collision detection. And I guess it's probably because there's obviously a lot of sprite multiplexing going on here, I think, because there's lots of things moving on screen at once, all over the place. And I think that's probably affecting the sprite collision detection, probably. And so, and to be fair, most of it's done without slowdown. There's not much slowdown in this. It's pretty nippy. It's okay. It's just you're not. That's the problem. And so, it's just you're not equipped to deal with how much is coming at you. So this was made by Mark Greenshields. He did Split Personalities before this, and also Bombo. And it had visuals by Ned Langman and music by Wii Music. They are ubiquitous at the moment, aren't they? Those and Dave Whittaker. Ben Dalglish and Dave Whittaker, they're everywhere. I thought the level visuals were pretty decent. There's nice shading and the varied structures from level to level, and it changes, and there's quite all right. The music's pretty decent as well. There is almost a decent shooter here, but it's the shooting part that lets it down. You just don't have enough of it, which renders you far too weak to deal with the oncoming onslaught, and it's a shame. If you had more bullets and slightly less enemies on screen, this would have been a whole lot better. Or if you picked up decent power-ups at a more frequent rate. I just kept getting extra speeds, which is like, well, that's not helping me shoot faster, which is what I need. And when I did get a tri-laser, for a brief moment, this turned out all right, but then I was dead really quickly. It was like I'd lost that, Oh, you've won the trouser press. Oh, you've lost the trouser press. It was literally that. So that if if they'd have done them, more power ups, faster shooter, this would have been a solid shooter because technically it's pretty clever. As it is, though, it's just another technically decent attempt that could have done with a little more testing before release. There's stuff to like here. Technically, it's okay. I mean, it's not perfect. There's a little bit, but there's lots and lots moving. And I think if you could just have the firepower to deal with that, and I think they couldn't. Obviously, that's where the sacrifices were made. It was just made in the wrong place. I didn't hate this. I just was frustrated by it because it's so hard because you can't deal with it. What about you?
Yeah, same story. Blocky but reasonable graphics with nice backgrounds, decent colours. It moved fast. I found there were some glitches here and there, but, so what? There was a few glitches, mainly looked like multiplex sprite issues. I think they've got a nice multiplexer engine that was struggling a bit. That could have been my emulator for all the difference it makes. So decent top-down shooter, I suppose, or at least an attempt at one in the tradition of, there's loads of them in there, Blight Force, Warhawk, all the ones you've named.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing here, aside from the presentation and the music, which is okay, it's, like you said, too frustratingly hard to get anywhere. It's just implausibly difficult, which means you're either exploiting it with a cheat to get anywhere, or you're just switching it off. It's full price, and at full price, I think there's better top-down shoot-ups that are a little bit more forgiving and give you a little bit more opportunity to get into it. So it's a misfire, this, which is a shame, because it had really quite a nice look to this and quite a nice feel. Just, again, playtest your damn games, and get whoever it is you get to playtest them. Assuming that it isn't, Genius McShoot 'em up from from the planet Shoot 'em Up. Get somebody human to play them. Who will turn around to you and go, it's too bloody hard, so that you can at least have a go at making it a bit easier, or provide them with a weapon system that actually upgrades as opposed to not doing anything. We'll come across another game that's similar a bit later, but it could have been something quite special, wouldn't it? It just misses the mark. Too hard, too difficult. What a shame.
Yeah. It's just an also around. I think 50 odd. What do you get? 55%.
Yeah, bang in the middle.
Bang in the middle. Yeah, it's not. It's too frustrating to be enjoyable.
Yeah, I've been to the toilet and experienced that kind of thing as well. So,
I know
many times.
I know.
I'm doing it right now.
Oh dear. Right. There we go. Hades Nebula. Too hard. Let's move along. We've got one game left, and we'll get into that right now. So Graham, did you max out your talk in Max Talk?
Oh, Max Talk. For some astonishing reason that I suppose we'll talk about, this got 70% anyway.
Yeah.
So this is from Martin Webb. Now, Martin Webb would later, because this is essentially a motorbike racing game, he went later to do Outrun and Road Blasters on the C64. Both of those are really shit.
Yeah.
So that didn't make me feel great about this. And this is presented by our friends at Bubble Bus, which is a name I just don't like.
I don't like it either. I don't like the logo either.
No, it's a little bubbly bus. No. So it's a motorcycle game. You've got to first choose your player from the following list: Bill Bullet, Jack Flash, Fiery Fred, Pete Power, Chris Crunch, Max Talk, Hairy Harry, and Big Knobhead. No, I did that one.
Chunky Colin.
So you get presented with like a screenful of helmets, not in a good way. Or any kind of way. That's anyway. So you use your joystick arrow to pick your player. There's no real stats on any of them, by the way. You've got no idea whether they're good, bad. They're just colours, coloured outfits, and I don't think it matters. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
It does. They've got different stats behind the scenes. Yeah,
right. Maybe are they must be on the instructions. Maybe I don't know.
I did try and find them, but I could only find the back of the case. So
then the race starts, and so will your nightmares. So it's kind of standard pole position style layout, that track layout. So we've seen this with many other racing games. So you got the track wiggling snaking its way around and doing that kind of, pole position style, zooming towards you kind of thing. You've got a giantish motorbike sprite. Your sprite's not terrible, but you've got a giant motorbike sprite for you on your bike. The ground to either side of that is bright yellow, so yellow, canary yellow ground, which is weird. I suppose it's better than brown, maybe. So you've got a large bike, too big, actually, really, when you think about it, because when you're trying to control this, it's next to impossible to control. If a real motorbike controlled this badly, they would never sell them because too many people would be dead on them. So when you're on the track, you push up on the joystick to speed up. Obviously, you control left and right with the left and right of the joystick, and you press the button to change gear. That's changing gear from ear-splitting to Shadmock levels of whining, which will set cats on fire. It's such a high-pitched whine for the motorbike sound. It's shrill.
I've got no glasses left.
Exactly, it's just shrill.
That just shattered everything in my house.
It will. It just make perfectly inane creatures just really hate on each other. It's like
spontaneously combust.
You could trigger an entire like the film The Birds could have been triggered by somebody playing this game. I think. So it's awful to control, quite floaty and quite naff. And you don't need floaty controls. A motorbike game needs to be responsive. So when you move left and right, even on the straights, it's got to just go left and right and stop. If you go left on a motorbike and then right yourself back in the middle, it doesn't sort of float around for a second. It has that kind of floaty feel, which is terrible. So the your competition in the race are just single colour blocks of ham that's going to float past and make noises at you. like a little bubble appears if you happen to bump into them, and obviously you can bump and try and navigate. The idea is to obviously win the stages of the race. The race is in timed stages, so not that you'll know any of that really till you come off, but there is a little UI at the top that sort of gives you some of that, obviously the parameters of the game. So obviously the idea is you've got to navigate your way through I think there's 6 or 7 stages. I can't remember, because a map screen comes up. When you look at this map, you're like, that isn't a motorcycle map. That looks like a map of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
It's just these really square corners. No wonder the corners are hard to navigate. This look right angles. That's navigationally challenging for anyone on a motorbike. That. So obviously you're in a race and you're zooming about. So you float about. In true tradition of these games, if you hit the roadside furniture, you're going to explode, because as we all know, all of these vehicles in these are very tempestuous. If you hit anything, they just explode violently, and obviously then you restart, and it's against the clock, and so you're going to end up in outrun style. Sort of shows you how far you got, which, by the way, for me was never really that far. So I guess the aim of it is to win. I think that's the aim of the game, is to win that race. I'm not sure which race it is. I don't think it has a name. I think it's just the race. So Zapped gave it 70%. I wouldn't give it anywhere near that. This is maybe in the 30s to 40s at best. If you're going to play a game like this, you'd have Super Hang-On from Epix, wouldn't you? You'd be playing that.
Super Cycle.
Super Cycle, sorry. You'd be playing Super Cycle from Epix.
Yeah.
If you're going to play a motorcycle game, you're going to play that. You're never going to play this. Unless someone, why would you have it? Why? So
yeah, true.
Because it's nothing comparison. The HUD on there shows you time, your gear, low or high, or like I said before, it's either ear splitting or pigeons killing each other. And there's some early warning of the corners and the sort of the steepness. But looking at the map, the corners are all steep, so there is no gentle cornering in this. You are flying around, and it has that horrible way of floating you off. If you say you're turning to the right, it floats you off violently and quickly at speed to the left. So you're going to be hitting the roadside furniture and slowing down and bumping into things and all. You don't ever feel like you're in control of the motorbike, which is a problem in a game that's fundamentally based on controlling a motorbike. So this was just a giant snoozer for me. It was rubbish. I didn't enjoy it at all. It's near enough to full price for it to be a slap across the cheeks at $8.95. How it got 70%, I'll never know. I thought it was really, really poor. And like I said, Super Cycle exists, so why on earth would you play this? What about you?
No, I didn't like this. I don't like the pun title, which could be total speech, I suppose.
Yeah, true.
Max talk, but that it's bold and chunky, and ultimately it's not very good. Bike racing, it's a rip off a Hang-On Super Cycle. It's not to win the race, just to get through the stages. So it's a stage-based one.
Even worse.
You choose from one of 7 riders. There's 6 stages. You get it through the time limit. It controls terribly. I didn't like how it controls. I've just noticed Super Cycle is miles better. And if you want a bike racing game, go and play that. And even if you can't get that and you want a budget title, I think what was the other one? Speed King.
Speed King, yeah,
Speed
better.
Out at a budget price by now, probably. Go play that. It's way better. The graphics are a weird mix of single color opponents and your strangely over animated biker. But the actual presentation of the game is really weirdly bare bones. The title screen is. It's all in the lower third. There's nothing in the top half of the screen. It's like, you could use that, you could use it for something. Why put it all down there? It's dead weird. Yeah. And I don't know, it would have been handy, as you said, to have some stats, because they do have stats. Not them looking shiftily to the right and raising their visor from time to time. It's like some carry-on thing.
It's weird.
It's all like
weird.
Just these visors going up.
That's how all motorbike races actually start. They have a 15-minute sequence where they just stand there and just do that.
Valentino Rossi and other people just it's an odd game, and it felt like a budget title, but £9 now, this could do one.
Absolutely.
And I also found the controls were quite unoptimized as well. Took ages to switch from high to low gear. It just wouldn't do it sometimes.
Was dead annoying.
And then oftentimes it would just break for no reason, and I'd be pushing forward and I'd be going, no, I'm slowing down. Not fun at all. No fun at all. No max torque. No. No talk, no switch off, don't like it. Sounds are awful as well, like you said, just dreadful noise. No, horrible.
No, max pork.
Cack pork. More like.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah, that's not a good one to end on. That's not been a particularly great set of games.
Well, Head Over Heels is the standout.
I was going to say
champion there.
It started off well, and then just quickly, dive bombed into the rest. So anyway, there you go. That's your first 5. We've got 5 more coming up. We're going to go for a quick break. You're going to hear something from one of our special Patreon-only releases, and you can listen to that. So we'll be back after that, where we have another 5 games to talk about. So we will see you in a bit.
Hearty meat pies to our amazing sponsor, DavidHearnWriter.com, where you will find bargain books, ebooks, audiobooks, and more. I think we should listen to a sample from his brand new book, Escape from the Commodore 64. Let's go.
How are you enjoying the metaverse? The what? Asked Sarah, stepping back. Never mind. It's a term from the future, and no one there's exactly sure what it means either, the gnome said with a chuckle. I'm a time traveller, see? Would you believe a couple of plumbers and a swift hedgehog reached the bread bin in decades to come? Sarah stared at him blankly. Can you help me get out of here? He nodded at the computer. That's your only way out. She felt heat creep up her cheeks. No, thank you, she said. In fact, I think I'll be going. Sarah opened the door to the next room, only to see 3 karate fighters engaged in combat before a gate and a beautiful sunset. She narrowed her eyes, taking in a cherry blossom tree, as the faint scent of lilac and rose wafted into the room. The 3 of them performed backflips before stopping and setting their eyes on her. Then their pants fell down. Thankfully, they were wearing virtual underwear.
Very cool indeed. Escape from the Commodore 64 audiobook is out right now. To find out more, visit DavidHearnWriter.com. Hello, it's me, Graham, from Zapped the Past, and this is a special Patreon-only interview. Now, back in 2014, I was planning on writing a book on the subject of C64 audio. The provisional title was The Many Voices of Sid, and it was to feature interviews and conversations with key C64 composers about their work, their methodology, and how they felt about their place in the computer game audio history. As part of the research for the book, I reached out to a number of video game music composers across all platforms, eras, and chipsets to try and discover some notion of the history and development of what had become a multi-million-dollar industry in its own right. The book was never to be, unfortunately, a victim of lack of time, of a sudden raft of retro game and C64 Kickstarters, a marriage, a divorce, a whole load of reasons. That meant the book never really got off the starting blocks. However, a couple of the interviews I recorded did survive, and this is one of them. I approached a legendary C64 and Amiga composer Chris Hulsbeck, hoping to gain an insight into his world and his amazing story and journey from Starball and the Great Giana Sisters to R-Type and Turrican 2 and beyond. This exclusive recording of that interview has never been heard before anywhere. It was recorded on a dictaphone next to a PC speaker via Skype. Shows you the kind of timing it was. So the quality of the audio isn't great, but this is a snapshot of time. I was a games tutor at the college, researching a book on C64 audio. Chris was working from his mobile studio in the USA on numerous amazing projects, and our calendars and diaries just happened by chance to really conform so we could get this interview off the ground. And our chat is very reflective of some instant rapport that I felt we had. So I do hope you can bear with the audio issues on this. And of course, remember that 2014 was a long time ago, and but we've all been through a lot of stuff since then, haven't we? So I do hope you enjoy this interview with Chris Hulsbeck, this Patreon-only exclusive available via Zapped to the Past. I teach video game design for a university, and a part of the course is a part on video game music. And this book project is really born from my inability to be able to sort of point my students in the direction of a good text on the subjects of video game music. There's books out there about game design and all of the mathematics and the programming and all of those sort of things. And I felt that there was no really good definitive book that sort of described the process of not just the early process, you know, break back to the Commodore 64 and the SID chip and sort of the early technological stuff. But there's no real definitive work for from an educational perspective and from a regular perspective, you know, that captures the kind of the techniques and the methods and the kind of the composition that goes into a lot of this video game music that I know you've been a key part of for many years.
There is actually there are 2 books that I bought that are kind of like this, and then the more important one is called The Complete Guide to Game Audio.
Okay.
By Aaron Marks.
Okay.
And I have it right here. I can send you the title.
Yeah, cool. If you would, that'd be great.
So that's like one. It's a couple of years old, but I think they're doing updates regularly. And it describes the process very well, actually. Yeah. So that might help.
Excellent.
And then there's a book here by the Fat Man, George Alistair Sanger, who had a really very successful run in the late 90s, early 2000s with music stuff. And his is more like he does like anecdotes and background info, but you get information in between, and he describes all kinds of techniques and adaptive audio and stuff like that, and the business part too, and so it's another one. So that's called The Fat Man on Game Audio.
Okay, I shall. If you send me those links, I'll track those down.
And there might be other ones, but those are the two ones that jump into my mind immediately.
I mean, you've been doing this. You've been doing video game audio for a long time now, right? I mean, this is 25 years, maybe more.
Started in 1985, 86.
Wow.
When I did a game for a friend. I did the audio for that, and then the really big breakthrough came with a contest that I won in a magazine. That was music for the Commodore 64, program music. So there were not that many people doing it at the time, and I won that contest, and that really started my career.
So did you program your own player at the time? Was that part of the challenge?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, at that time you had to, because there was not really any commercial music software out there that could really do it nicely. And I also, since I was programming it, I was also pushing the envelope more than other people, and that gave me an advantage.
I think it did, because looking at your music specifically at least on the Commodore 64 from a technical point of view, you're one of the kind of pioneers of early sampling, right?
Yes, and that was one of the things exactly on the Commodore 64. I found out a trick how to play 4-bit samples on top of the sound chip sounds, and that gave me effectively it was 4 voices, but then I also did some tricks with quick switching, and it sounded more like 5 voices, and that's what people said in the magazines. This sounds so much like 5 voices are playing at the same time, and
So where did the inspiration for your music start? I mean, is it for the process for you? Did you get a game idea given to you from some programmer or something, and you were starting to match your music to that, or did you find it was more of, because your music's very melodic and that's what I love about it, because it's really very heavy. At least the early part and the C64 and the Amiga stuff is beautifully melodic and fantastic instrumentation. Did you find that was your approach to it? Because we spoke to Ben Daglish, and his approach was slightly different to that. I'm just curious to know.
Right, exactly. So for me at the time, I started with all this. It was not necessarily to match the vibe of the game exactly. That came a little bit later and developed over the years. I think in the beginning it was just like, what kind of fun music can we make, and then just put it in the game and just have fun with styles and stuff like that. And for me also, I actually have done this talk a few times. Maybe if your university will invite me someday or so, I will do that with my background. When I started as a child, I became interested in electronic music, and I listened to all those great Kraftwerk and Jean-Michel Jarre, Vangelis, and Tangerine Dream. They were my electronic music idols, so to speak. And the instruments that they were using, they were super expensive. I mean, I could as a teenager not ever dream of owning something like that. My family wasn't that rich. So for me, the outlet was the Commodore 64, and since I read in a magazine the specs, and that it had like a real synthesizer sound chip was waveforms and filters and envelopes and everything, and I thought, wow, this is pretty much like the synthesizers that my idols are using, just like in a smaller version. And that was something I could aspire to, and I I earned some money on the side, delivering newspapers and things like that, and then I had a little bit of help by the grandma, and so I took a Commodore 64 home, and that was really like my creative outlet, so to speak, for my electronic music ambitions. So I think it's just that that created that trajectory for me, and it worked out beautifully. I mean, I love my job, and
absolutely. And you know, I wonder, because you created quite a lot of music. I mean, you're obviously still very an active musician now, and I imagine you probably play quite a number of instruments as well.
Actually, not that much. I play keyboard. I only had like 2 years of piano lessons when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And I gave up because my grandma was teaching me. She was like very old school and was hitting us with sticks when we did mistakes. And I also wasn't interested in playing the music that other people had composed. I came up with my own melodies pretty early on, and so I play keyboard to get my ideas into the computer, and from there massage it and work it. But interestingly, I have picked up a few instruments over the years just to play around with it and see what I could do, and one is a ukulele.
Really?
And so every now and then I play the ukulele on my tracks, and it works out beautifully.
That's really cool. Now, you one of the, not I say rarer musicians, but you've been on the game music scene for quite some time, because you've seen it from early 8-bit, like you say, the SID, and then you made the transition to the Amiga quite successfully, whereas many others didn't at that time.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was always looking for the next gen and what else to do, and I had just like hit the ceiling on the Commodore 64 in terms of what I could do technically. And also the thing was, even though I absolutely loved how it was going with my career and what I was doing at the time, my real aspirations were like to do the stuff that Tangerine Dream was doing, you know. So I wanted to put out albums of my music and have, you know, work in it or have access to a real audio studio with high-end expensive stuff. So that was always the goal in my mind, to get there someday. And so the Amiga was just a very interesting stepping stone, because it had 4 sample channels.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really a question for me. I bought the Amiga, I think in the first or second year after my success started was the game music stuff, just to have it around. And so it was already there, and I still kept working on the Commodore 64 for a while, because that's, you know, what was the most successful at the time. But we could already see that the Amiga would be another successful machine.
Absolutely. And then, did you find that the working on the Commodore 64 made you a more economical composer? Did you have to sort of, when you were writing the music, did you find that you were reusing certain parts? And did you know that obviously you got 64K, right? And you didn't even have that maybe 4K tops. You know, how restricted? How did the restriction guide your composition? And then how much freer was it when you got to 16-bit?
Yeah. So obviously from the note input data or whatever, it was very sequenced. So you could reuse parts of a sequence in a kind of like a track list where you would call up patterns. And so if you had like one bass figure or so, you only had to store it once in memory, and then you could call it any number of times. And you even had I had in my system ways to transpose a figure and stuff like that. So you could work very, very economical there. And then on the Commodore 64, the sound was mostly generated on the synthesizer sound chip. Later came the sample part, but 4-bit samples are also not taking up that much room. Yeah. And it was only a couple drums and things, so that worked out. And then I used the same techniques pretty much on the Amiga computer. I kept the pattern-based sequencing, and then just like short samples. And so you always had to keep track of the memory, especially when you're working in commercial games, because usually they would only allocate like 10 to 20% max to sound. The rest was graphics and program.
I mean, you've got some amazing Amiga music out there. I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got X Out, Z Out, Turrican, and these are, and these are considered, magnificent pieces of game music at that time, and they still stand the test to this day, right? I mean, these are especially Turrican. I think there's multiple channels in there. Is this you pushing your technology again and trying to get that bigger Tangerine Dream style sound?
Oh, absolutely. With the Turrican 2, for example, we put this. So I already knew that it could be done more because I had done it on the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And I tried it a few times, and I didn't get good results with the CPU. But I had a friend and colleague from the industry who did a full simulation of what the Amiga was doing on the Atari ST.
Ah, right, okay.
And so he had 4 voices mixed, and he had a very efficient way of doing it. And luckily, it was so nice to share it with me. His name was Jochen Hippel.
Right.
So I transcribed it back to the Amiga and did a couple more changes here and there, and then I had the 4-voice mixer on the Amiga that would mix into one voice of the Amiga sound chip, and that gave me 7.
Wow! So that's a much bigger sound. I mean, even with using sampled sound in that kind of way, that sort of explains the kind of Turrican 2 sound, because it's really full. And it's a well-matched score to the game. I think that's the general consensus. I think it's in the top 5 Amiga scores of all time or something like that.
Yeah. And that Turrican 2 title, I think, is still one of my most famous pieces.
Yeah. Because, did you do the conversion for the Nintendo for that? Did you do the conversion of the music for the SNES and for any of the other sort of consoles at the time?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I was actually also doing some programming on the SNES and the Mega Drive.
Wow.
But there I got some help also from the Factor 5 guys who were moving into the console space too, and that was still pretty much those were the last players that I was involved with.
Yeah. And
from then on, I had usually programmers do my implementations.
Yeah, great stuff. So, so you went from the Amiga, then how many titles did you get involved with on the consoles? Because what we found with our students is that their knowledge of games and the game music, which is lacking in some respects, it extends from when they first got into games. So, for a lot of the students now, we're talking sort of PS2, and anything before that is a kind of a footnote or retro as far as they're concerned.
Right, and also from that point on, they had full Red Book, MP3 audio.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't even know how it was back then. And
no. And that's kind of the point. That's the angle of this book, really, is to say, for example, on the Commodore 64 alone, you've got, I think it's on the latest HV SIDS, there's 55 or 56,000 pieces of music there, and that's a lot of music for any one device. That's quite spectacular, and still music being created for that. And it's just that there's a denial of all of that all of the talent and musician and programming and skill that went into that, and then moving on to the Amiga, that's all vanished, right? And then all the scores that came through the Mega Drive and the SNES. The idea of this book is to kind of put those back on the map, and the composers that did it. I know you're still very active, and you have a lot of music out and about now, and you're still, I know that you've been involved in the Heroes of Game Music project, for example, with Rick Eady.
Yeah.
So it's just the book is really just putting, being able to get your ideas of the games and the game music and the industry and how it's changed, and how you kind of did what you did into some kind of text, so that there's documented somewhere, not lost in the mists of time somewhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're including a lot of other people too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a great response to this book, Chris. We've a lot of the for the early part, the Commodore 64 composers. We've got there, Joran Tell, Rob Hubbard, Ben Daglish, Fred Gray,
awesome.
And they've all, we've all either spoken to them or interviewed them, or we've had Q&A with them, similar obviously to what you're doing. But also we're looking for new guys. So I've spoken, and I've got a workshop, believe it or not, with Rick Eady CD because I went on his Kickstarter project and gave him a good donation for that to get your CD made, so I can buy that CD, right? Because I really want to hear that. And also, we've approached some of the bigger sort of composers. You know, I got an email today from Frank Klepecki, who did the Command and Conquer music, and I've got an email from the guy that did the music for the Lara Croft game and Dead Space games, and we've just had an incredible response, and from people like yourself that have, you know, musicians foremost, who've composed a lot of music and not necessarily, you know, had necessarily the coverage and the respect, I think, shown in the circle of the industry, obviously, yes, but I think the wider impact for students, certainly on my program, is that they, you know, that these music must somehow appear on these games, and that these composers are invisible entities, and I'm afraid that wouldn't stand. I had to do something about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was actually invited a few times to speak to students. Last time was just a couple of weeks ago at the Pop Academy in Mannheim in Germany.
Yeah.
And the students are always very intrigued and tell us after that they had no idea how this all came about. And the thing is, you know, I show the history and how my music developed, and it goes from like my first organ recordings that I did at home to you know, how those first Commodore 64s sounded like, and then the Amiga, and then progress it's like a full timeline of how things happened, and they always appreciate that.
I mean, what is your workflow now? I mean, obviously you had back in the mid 80s you had a Commodore 64, and I imagine probably I don't know how did you do what you did in the 80s, and how do you do what you do now? I mean, this is a world apart, right?
Right. Actually, one thing is there's like photos floating around. I actually was also an electronics freak at the time, and I built my own keyboard that I could hook up to the Commodore 64, and I mapped the keys of the keyboard to the keys, you know, the regular computer keyboard, and mapped them into my music program, so I could actually play some lines. It was pretty crude and didn't work very well, but that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. And if you fast forward, I mean, in the mid '90s, I finally had my big studio. I had all, you know, like high-end audio machines and a big mixing desk and all those things. It looked like a spaceship. Where I was working, and then in the 2000s or 2001, it all changed again and became totally virtual. So you could simulate all those expensive machines in the computer for a fraction of the cost, and that's where I'm now. So I'm creating everything back in the computer. Actually, my main workstation is a high-end laptop.
Sun, Sea and Chippy Tea to our sponsor, DavidHearnWriter.com. Let's take another listen to his amazing new book, Escape from the Commodore 64.
Our job, Nell continued, is to make as much money as we can and buy our way off this planet. This planet? Yeah, this is Targa. She pointed to another sign which read, Targa Tours coming soon. Apparently you used to be able to find the means to escape just by plodding about, but the new mayor soon put a stop to that. And you've done this how many times? Sarah asked, knuckles white around the flight stick. Nell bobbed her head like the little cat Sarah's mother had on their car's dashboard. Oh, once or twice. You used to not die in this game, but... I get it, Sarah said, interrupting Nell. The new mayor. Nell nodded. Yeah, hotels are going up once he figures out how to change the graphics so they're not see-through vectors. Imagine taking a shower in this place. Sarah looked at Nell oddly and instinctively sniffed at her. With a whoosh, the craft shot out into the skies above. The altimeter whirred through a heart-pounding ascent, scenery flashing past in a kaleidoscope haze.
As the mayor of Targ, I declare this book awesome. Escape from the Commodore 64 audiobook is out right now. Visit DavidHearnWriter.com today. What are you waiting for?
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that. It was good. good. More of it if you go on our Patreon. You can hear the full thing.
Full hour-long interview.
Yeah, full hour-long interview. You can hear the whole damn lot. You can get, the whatever it's, what's Quint say? Teeth, the head, the whole damn thing. I don't think it says
The whole bally lot, yes.
whatever.
You didn't say that.
No, you didn't. Anyway, we've got 5 more games. I don't think there's any crap bursts. I couldn't find any, but we've got the charts.
No.
5 more games, and then we're done. We're done with August. It is done. So let's get into these games. And our first game is Oink. Interesting game, Oink, for many reasons. So let's talk about Oink. Oink, the game, is based on Oink, the comic, which ran from 1986 to 1988 and had 68 issues. It started off fortnightly, then went to weekly, then went to monthly, and then stopped. So strange. But Oink was pretty revolutionary and subversive for the time. And I'm just going to quote, this is the bit from some interesting details here from Wikipedia as to who worked on it. So just to give some background to the game and the comic itself. So this is from Wikipedia. It says, part of its difference in the marketplace was that it attracted writers and cartoonists from a wide range of previous disciplines. It was devised, launched, and edited by Patrick Gallagher, Private Eye regular contributor Tony Husband, and Mark Rogers. Although within the fiction of the comic, it was edited by a character called Uncle Pig, which was similar to 2000 AD's Thag the Mighty. The comic also followed 2000 AD's lead in crediting its contributors for their work, which was still a rarity in British comics at that time. So the featured artists and writers included Husband's Private Eye colleague David Haldane, ex-The Fall member and future BBC Radio 1 radio host Mark Lard Riley, Malcolm Douglas, Brickman creator Lou Stringer, future Beano writer-artist Kev F. Sutherland, future Marvel artist, writer and editor and current SpongeBob SquarePants magazine editor David Leitch, future Financial Times cartoonist Jeremy Banks, and satirical media commentator to be Charlie Brooker. All worked on this. Also, Viz founders Davey Thorpe and Chris Donald also contributed some one-off strips, as did the Beano's Tom Patson and John Gearing. Illustrator Steve McGarry was an occasional contributor, including creating front covers for 2 issues. So there's a lot of names here in the British comic world and British sort of world of satire and everything. So you can see kind of why this was seen as a little bit different. And it was. They got into trouble. One of the things they did get in trouble, I posted this in, so I'll stick this out on Twitter maybe when we put it, is there's a story called Janet and John and the Parachute Jump. Did you have a look at it in the agenda?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
It's good, isn't it? So it was based. So Janet and John were a series of books. They very British books, Janet and John Adventures. Well, they did a parody of that with his parachute jump. Well, not wrong, but anyway, and that basically got them in some trouble. They got taken to court. They eventually they were found not guilty of anything, but because of the nature of it, they saw the magazine end up on the top shelf, which damaged sales because it was out of the comic range of kids and stuff like that. And maybe because of that, I don't think I was ever aware of this comic. It's not. I wasn't really massively into comics, I suppose. So, and if I was looking on the top shelf, it was for other stuff. Let's just leave it at that. And thus, my knowledge of the game is equally sparse. So, the game was created by John Williams, and John Williams previously done Night Games, so that's pretty decent. It also done a game called Legend of the Nooker Hole, which sounds painful.
Sounds
and
very
horrible,
painful.
which I've never heard of. Anyway, so this is a multi-part game where you take the role of Uncle Pig, and you have to prepare the next edition of the comic, which is issue 100, in time for publication. The game starts with a stats page showing the date. So on the right-hand side, there's some stats, essentially. And it shows the date of the next publication, and the time of day where you're at, along with the page number you are looking at and the magazine circulation. So these figures and stats, they stay there on the right most of the time, apart from when you're playing the games. On the left is the mini-game progress. So when you press fire, you start the game, and you get a series of stats again on the left. You get high scores for the 3 mini games that the game has at the top, and instructions to start or end the game. So if you move the joystick up or down, this takes you to the various pages in the comic. So that's on the left of the screen. So they kind of change, those stats change. So you can see essentially what you're doing is you're flicking through the pages of the comic, and you've got all of the comic pages have 10 empty panels in them, and those 10 empty panels need to be filled, and that's how you basically get this comic out. So moving up takes you to the pages for the 3 games you can play. I'll go through them in a moment, but you've got games Pete's Pimple, Rubbish Man, Superhero, and Tom Thug. Beyond this are the other pages you need to fill, and they're called Mary Lighthouse, Russell Grunt's Hoggoscope, Grunt's Uncle Pig's Page, The Secret Diary of Hadrian Vile, Nasty Laughs and Specs Joke Page, and competitions. You can kind of see the tone of this magazine and this comic and the game, by these titles. So a quick bit of maths sees you having to get 90 panels to complete the issue ready for publication. So the way you do this is you do this by doing better and better at the 3 mini games. So I'll go through them now. The first, if you go to any of the 3 mini games pages and you press fire, you then can go into, it basically kicks off that game. So the first one is Pete's Pimple. So Pete's Pimple is essentially crack out. So sideways breakout. The bricks spell out Oink in the first screen, and the bat is on the left. And so essentially the ball starts flying. You've got to hit the ball back, destroy the blocks, and so on and so forth. It's breakout. Arrows will come across the screen from right to left. And you can press the fire button all the time, whenever you want. You can hold it down, actually, and it will constantly fire. You'll just basically sort of your bat kind of opens up and shoots. So you need to shoot the arrows. Don't hit any of them. Hit contact with any of them, and you lose one of your 5 lives within that mini game. If the ball goes past you, you lose a life, so on and so forth. It's breakout. And the ball speeds up pretty rapidly, and the game gets fast, quick. So to actually clear a screen is quite the challenge. But you've got to clear a screen to get a panel on that page. So essentially, I think what you've got to do I didn't get there, but you've got to clear 10 screens to fill out the 10 panels in the Pete's Pimple page. If you do that, if you do clear a screen, you also get 3 bonus panels, and you can put those bonus panels, you can apply them to any of the other 6 pages which don't have a minigame attached to them. The second minigame is Rubbish Man Superhero, and this is a top-down, left to right. Now, imagine Zaxxon style thing, but if Zaxxon was seen from the top, so you can go up and down, and up, so as in altitude. What's the word I'm looking? Altitude. So you can move up and down,
higher and lower.
Yeah, higher and lower from the actual level you're on, but you can also move left and right. But it's seen from the top, and it scrolls left to right. It sounds complicated. It's not really. You play a rubbish superhero who has to blast stuff, so you can shoot. There's stuff in your way that you have to blast your way through, and you have to screen scrolls, and you fly over and under various obstacles, which you tell how high they are by shooting them. But kind of like Zaxxon, if your shots go past them, you can fly past them. Sometimes you've got to go under, sometimes you've got to go over, and so on and so forth. Progress leads to panels for the comic, and completing sections of that. There are 10 sections to get through, and if you further you get, the more panels you get for the comics, and so on and so forth. The third game, Tom Thug. Now, this is a top-down, 8-way kind of arena shooter, multi-screen, where you can go from left to right and you can move around in 8 directions. A shooter where you navigate. It's like a maze type affair. You can shoot some enemies, you can stun others. You collect bonuses and pages and keys to unlock different parts of the maze, and you progress and so forth. Collect pages, get bonus pages through the bonus panels, through the pages, and that's it. That's what you got to do. The good thing is progress is saved on each mini game. So if you get past the stage, you start at that next stage. So if you clear the first screen in the breakout one in Pete's Pimple, you don't start at the beginning again. You start on stage 2 when you go back to it, and you need to, because you're never going to get to the end on 5 lives because it moves very fast. And so that's quite a nice affordance. That it's like you've done that panel, right, now try and complete the next one. And so you progress and the screens get harder and so on and so forth. Every time you play a level, the time advances by the time by the way is constantly clicking away towards your deadline date. Every time you play a game, it goes forward 3 hours, so 3 hours are added onto it. And I didn't get there, but I think what happens is if you don't have the comic ready in time for publication, then that's how you fail the game. You'll die in the mini games, but you can just keep retrying them. The only way they fail this is if you don't have the comic ready. I think that's how it works. It looked that way. I didn't play it fully enough to get there, but that's how it works. There's no music to speak of, but the sound effects are pretty solid, I thought. And the visuals are a strange mix of weird sprites and bas relief, which I thought worked pretty well. I thought the visual side to this was actually quite nice. It looks unusual, and it doesn't look like much else. There's a strange look to this whole game, and the way it plays is odd. The main dashboard is easy to navigate. Take note, Falcon, Renegade Lord. And once you get the hang of it and know that each play of a game advances the in-game clock by 3 hours, you start to get a notion that getting all the panels is quite the challenge. This is a hard game, and to get them all, you're going to have to do quite well. Obviously, the problem is this all rests on the 3 mini games themselves, and whether you want to progress through all 3 of them. They're okay for what they are. Although I do wish the player sprite was a bit smaller in the Rubbish Man, and it was easier to read the heights of the various obstacles. It's kind of tricky, and I found myself dying a lot just by my toe catching something or trying to fly over something, which I thought would be flat, but is not. And I kept forgetting, and it's a bit of a pain to navigate through that section. It's an interesting game, this, and I think it's had quite a lot of thought put into it. And the three mini games, they're all very different in tone and style and the way they play. So you might find you probably like some better than you'll like others. I'd never played it. I was completely unaware of the comic. I quite enjoyed this, and I was pretty glad I found them and sunk some time into this. This was all right. It got 84%. They liked it because of its kind of quirky originality, and I can see why. I think it's about a good score for this. So yeah, this was all right. This was strangely not what I was expecting, but I was pleasantly surprised by what I did get. What about you?
Yeah, like you, I never heard of Oink. I've never come across it, and I'd never even seen this game before. I've maybe seen it, as in the adverts and stuff, but I certainly never played it. So it's an interesting enough take on the old kind of mini-game compendium thing. I liked the way that they constructed this kind of assemble the comic panel stuff around that. The design of the game is quite innovative and quite interesting. So I quite like that. The mini-games are quite hard, though,
Yes.
and that's a real test, in keeping with this episode's difficulty level. So, the games do get hard when they get difficult quickly as well, especially the sort of the crack-out clone, as you say. But they do look nice. They play well. This game is slick, so there's no bugs. There's nothing. It all feels slick and competently put together, and they do work. And the colours and everything else really work. The graphics in this game are really nice. The design of the game is nice, and the way it looks. The main interface can be a little bit confusing but it's really fast and responsive. So you soon clicking and figuring out where you want to be. It's not like that other god-awful thing where where you were trapped in the brown world of Brown trying to navigate your way out of Brownsville.
Falcon, the Renegade Lord.
Yeah, so I liked the games. Of the Breakout clone. I like you say that Breakout clone. I quite like Breakout clone, so I spent a bit more time trying a hammer at that, and it is tough. The top-down sort of scrolling one, for the exact same reasons you describe, I found it a bit frustrating in that it's really hard to judge height when you're looking straight down over the top of something. That's why those isometric sort of variants like Zaxxon have a shadow on the bottom, so you can sort of, and then they tend to do that. But that's a small thing. The third game was my favourite, the Berserk type one in the maze, where you're running around shooting.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really, really good. A really clever little mini game, and arguably a good game in its own right as well. It's quite fun and interesting. I like the fact that you can't just shoot everything. That you got to shoot some of the ones that kind of follow you around, and you got to sort of hide them. Stun them, sort of get them to follow you, stun them, move around them, and the maze felt quite big to sort of explore all of that. So I quite liked it. It is hard. It's a little bit, debilitating, but it's not like you just die and then it's like, right, you're done, go back to the start again. Like you said, you've got respawns, you've got things to go at, you've got plenty of time to get better at the game. So it's not punishing you for not doing well. It's actually giving you more chance to get better at it. And you can get better at this. These are basically reaction-based games, and the game is responsive to your reactions on the joystick. So it's not like it's sluggish and bouncing you around. Take note, bloody Gobots. Not that was sluggish, man. That was flinging you around like a bogey on a bloody piece of string, which is a strange metaphor. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have to put bogies on string. I don't wipe my nose on string. I usually have
conkers.
That's really bizarre. If you sneeze out conkers, you need to be...
No, you have conkers on string.
I was going to say this. Although, to be fair, sneezing out conkers could be quite a good defence if you was trapped in a difficult situation. Anyway, I don't know why I'm even heading down that road.
Well, so this was head shoots out donuts.
True. So I think it's good fun. I'd never played it before. I don't know how or why it relates to the comics. I'd never even seen or heard of that. But if it's anything like the little snippet that you found that we can post in the show notes, it quite looked like it was quite interesting. There was certainly a good cast of characters behind the comic, enough to make this game interesting. Mini games are good fun. They're all very slick, very well designed. Look and feel is nice. I liked it. I like this a lot. It deserved its 84%, maybe even a tad higher, but it's certainly good. It's certainly good, and it's the right price for the right kind of game. You're getting 3 games really in that, and 3 good games too, so go for it. I liked it. I liked Oink. Good stuff.
Yeah, there we go. Nice one to start with. That's good. Let's hope it continues.
Long may it continue.
Long may it continue. So let's see if it does. And does it, Graham? Is Amaurote? How do you pronounce that? Amaurote?
I'm saying Amaurote.
Amaurote. Okay, well, tell us all about Amaurote.
So, Amaurote, $1.99 budget game from Master Chronic. So, scored 39%. This is from originally, the design is from the Pickfords. So, Steve and John Pickford both did design graphics for every other version except the Commodore 64, I think. So, clearly, I don't know, more of an affinity, certainly in their description, in their webpage.
Steve Pickford did the visuals.
I don't know if he did for the C64 version. He might have done. I don't know.
He's credited, anyway. Yes. I don't know.
He must have done them then. So, this game is based around the city of Amaurote, which has been invaded by huge aggressive insects who have built colonies. Colonies?
Billies? Billy Connolly's.
Billy, I thought I said colonies. Yeah, that's what they've done. Billy Connolly's. In each of the city's 25 sectors, as the only uninjured army officer left after the invasion, you've got a job to do, which is to go and destroy all the insect colonies. So you are the player controlling the Arachnus 4, an armored fighting machine that moves on 4 legs, or as I like to call it, a spider egg. That's what it is, an eggy spider.
Yeah, it's an eggy spider.
And you actually get to see more of the eggy spiderness in all the other versions of this game. I'll come to that in a little bit. So as the player, you must first select a sector to play and via like a map screen, and then you control the Arachnus as it wanders around the top-down view of the cityscape, attacking marauding insects and searching for the insect queen using your scanner. You launch bombs, which I just feel is a bit bouncing bombs at that out there. So the things you shoot, it's a bit crappy that. They don't really work in the top-down view. You can only launch one at a time, so if your bomb misses its intended target, the player will have to wait until it hits the scenery or bounces against the fence or over the other way, more fencing in the space again, before you can fire. Once the queen has been located, you can radio in to drop a super bomb, which can then be used to destroy the queen. Once you do that, you get other supplies radioed in as well, such as extra bombs, and you can ask to be pulled out of the combat zone, and then you can even get extra weaponry, which costs you dosh in an in-game currency. So there's a little bit of upgrade tree, a little bit of wander around. The game is essentially wander around, top-down view, killing insects, trying to find the insect queen and blowing it up. That's kind of what you do. There's different enemy types, drones, scouts, and queens. As you bomb these, you eventually clear enough, then you can bomb the queen, you can move on. So that's the game. Music by Dave Whittaker in this. The music's kind of got an interesting mix of short, 14-second classic Dave Whittaker loop, and then weird in-game music that's kind of got a really spooky sound, which belies the entire rationale of the game. You could be playing a sort of spooky castle game with that kind of music, but it's interesting. But the game itself is horrible in this state. All the other versions of this on every other platform are isometric. There's an isometric game, this. And they're actually way better, especially the Spectrum 128K version, which absolutely squashes the floor with the C64 version. This C64 version wasn't programmed, of course, by the Pickfords. It was programmed by Andrew Routledge, who did 180. So it's not like the guy can't code or anything like that. I think they just decided, and looking at the description about the whole game inside of the Pickfords website, they basically put a lot of time and effort into all of the extra capacity that they suddenly had on the Spectrum 128K, and there's loads of intro graphics and fancy stuff. It's got loads of presentation front end on Amaurote on those versions, and then the 64 version's kind of at the end of it in a paragraph that going, yeah, and the 64 version, we didn't really have much time for that, so we didn't think the visuals would work in an isometric way after the glider rider difficulties, so they just opted to just make it top down and just and it doesn't really work in that way. So every other version's better than this. The Amstrad versions, the Spectrum 48K, the Spectrum 128K version, that would be the version to play if you're going to play this, if you're going to go for it. I don't think the top-down thing is a load of rubbish. I just don't think it's really a very interesting game. By their own admission, they didn't really think much of the game after they retrospectively looking back. They're kind of like, well, it's a bit dull, a bit boring, really, this game. And I suppose it is, because there's not a great deal to do outside of that. So there's perhaps an interesting idea of a shoot 'em up if you had more shooting ability, if you didn't just throw bombs in different directions. And I think for me, the main issue with this game is just it seems to meander and go nowhere, which seems to be the problem with this game and every version of this game, isometric or otherwise, is that you're just kind of wandering around as an eggy spider, just dropping bombs and that. Which, and if that was the game design, document, I'm sure there's probably more to it than that. And it must have taken a lot to create all those graphics in the 3D. And then, at the front end of the Spectrum, you get this sort of animation where the guy runs in, jumps into an egg, it's airlifted into this thing and dropped on the planet, and then it grows its legs and you're walking around. And there's even some digitized face. I think it might even be one of the Pickfords who are digitized and they blink. And there's loads of extra front end. And there's 64K's worth of extra stuff in there that they've really leveraged and thrown loads into that. So this is not an optimized version of this game, even if it was, the game's pretty boring. So apart from the spooky-ish kind of Dave Whittaker soundtrack, which is interesting, I don't think there's much to really go at here other than for the novelty value of looking at the other versions that we can do now, obviously, in retrospect. So they didn't put a lot of effort into it. It shows. I don't think their heart was in this game. Certainly wasn't in the C64 version because it doesn't really push the machine in any really decent direction. The graphics are okay, don't get me wrong, and they're exceptionally good on the other platforms. They're just a bit blocky and chunky and a bit naff on the C64, but you can see that loads of effort went into the animation. The animation of the legs in the isometric version really intricate, and it really sort of clacks and scuttles about in a really nice way. The details are all there. So this is just not the best version to play of a game that's not really that great. As a footnote, there's actually a 2022 reboot of this from the C64 group Elysium. It's a mind-boggling conversion when you play it, and you can download it for free. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's just mind-boggling. It's actually based off the Atari 8-bit version of the game, and it's created by somebody called Christoph, I can't pronounce his name, Christoph Dabrowski. Sorry if I got that wrong, Christoph. But he was the chief programmer of a small team of people that took Amaurote from the Atari 8-bit in its isometric version and made an isometric C64 version. Now, they've upped the ante on it. It still suffers what you can only describe as the classic C64 problem, and that is that the 6510 does not have enough grunt to push isometric graphics very well. So there's loads of extra switches and accelerators and things you can switch on that version, this new version, which means that it actually runs at the same speed as all the other ones. What you'll quickly discover, though, and this is no disrespect to Christoph or anybody else, even in the blog that he's written about this, and we'll put the notes link to that in the show notes, he even confesses that it's a really odd game to have converted because it's a bit of a Marmite game for some people, because nobody really, it's not one you go, oh, Amaurote, yeah. You know, if you're talking about Head Over Heels, Last Ninja, it's not necessarily going to be in the same conversation. Long and the short of all of that, it's an averagely dull game in whichever version you play, and sadly, even a 2022 reboot still suffers from that problem, but it's a bit of a footnote, really. Interesting sort of idea around it. Just, I don't really know where it was going to go. Did you enjoy your time as a spider egg?
I did not enjoy my time as a spider egg. This is a rather dull wander about the city top-down affair where you move slowly in the cardinal directions, hunting bugs to throw a single bomb at.
Yeah. That's
and you can only throw them from the side as well, because if they're going upwards and you're behind them going upwards, the boy you throw the bomb, it'll just go past them because they don't line up.
Yeah.
And that's problematic. It's a Pickford Brothers design, original isometric of the Spectrum, and it's quite good and interesting. We've sort of bemoaned this in sometimes, so it's to see that they've ditched that view and sort of actually go, look, isometric stuff is just problematic on the CC. Let's do something else. Okay, that's good. It's not so good to see that they've not considered the rest of the game because, as they noted, as we've all seen, as anybody who plays this can spot from a mile off, there's no game to this. It's really dull. The visuals are nice. Even in the C64 version, I quite like the animation on the legs and stuff, and the backgrounds are nice. There's nice colour. The soundtrack, I thought was really good. It adds a creepy atmosphere as you're going about these sort of deserted cities. But it's just dull to play, and that's the main issue. Everything around it is clever and looks nice, and then you just spend forever looking for bees. Like,
yeah.
You know, the one
much.
thing in my life, and I've said this, that I never want to do is look for bees. I don't like bees and wasps. So actually telling me, and the arrows were sometimes broken as well at the bottom. They were saying, tell me to go down. I was at the bottom of the map. I was like, I can't go down.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some little bugs and stuff there. I thought if they were really going to hone in on this, the main idea is fine. You know, cities taken over by bees. Okay, insects, giant insects and stuff, and you got to kill them and destroy them. Yeah, cool. Okay. If they'd have just gone, you know, let's get rid of this bouncing bomb nonsense one time. I think let's just make this into something like Zed or Parallax. You know, a 360-degree shooter.
Yeah.
Because I think that. And because the top-down worlds that Steve Pickford has created are really nice looking, and if you'd have been scrolling around that in nice 360 degrees and shooting stuff, and bees that have been coming at you and stuff, and you'd have been shooting, I thought that could have been quite a nice, visually nice intro. You know, sort of formulaic. £2 it would be better than this, but no, it's just ploddy and boring. Spider egg be damned. Who'd have thought? You know, if you're a spider egg, it'd be boring. Sounds like a cool thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But you know, like life, they found a way.
Yes, exactly. The posters advertising the job of being the pilot of the spider egg, they didn't live up to the expectations. You know, when you got the job, it was like, is there more to this spider egg driving? Because it feels pretty, you know, mundane. It's like, sorry, you've signed up, and there's no way out now.
Yeah, you should have read the small print. You should have read the legal pack. Did you never watch James Under the Hammer? I'm
sorry. Yes, it was written in spider, but that's beside the point.
I thought a spider just crawled across the paper. It's not our fault.
Just wrote, help me. Why is he doing that? Get off.
So yeah, Amaurote gameplay. There you go. Not for us. Let's move along. We've got 3 left. And our next one is another arcade conversion. This is Metrocross. There we go. So it's another arcade. It is a port of Metrocross from Namco, and it was the 1985 arcade game by the same name, Metrocross. Graham, would it surprise you if I told you that maybe you saw this? That this was based on the Pac-Land hardware, just with a modified color palette?
Now you say that, no.
No, it would not surprise me. No, I didn't think it wouldn't. I didn't think it would. Sorry. You take control of the runner. That's who you are. You are the runner. And that is because it's your job to run and jump. Maybe you should be the run and jumper. I don't know.
The running man.
The running man. Yeah, I suppose. So Metrocross is, at its heart, a time-based checkpoint game. You've got to run from left to right and get to the goal before the timer runs out, and it's game over. If you don't make it, that's it. So there are 24 levels to complete, and the game is presented in a pseudo 3D. So whereas whereas Pac-Land existed on a single 2D plane, this exists on a 5-lane sort of checkerboard where you can move up and down it at your will. So you kind of, double dragon, golden axe style, that sort of thing. So you're moving up and down that, and you're legging it from left to right. And so you do that, you move downward, up and down, you speed up and slow down by moving left and right, and you press fire button to jump. Nice, simple controls. We can all get along with them. Along the track are various objects, some of which are bad, and you need to either avoid these, jump over them, or whatever. So green squares will slow you down. Trap squares will see you fall into them. Mine squares will explode. All these will sort of cost you time, essentially, and you don't want to lose. If you lose too much time, you're not going to make it game over. Rats will nibble your shoulders. I never saw any rats, but never mind. Hurdles, Coke cans, rolling Coke cans come at you, and hurdles and walls are also there. So just the same as hurdles, really, just different graphic. They all need to be leapt over. If you kind of clip them, you'll sort of stumble a bit. Whilst tires, chessmen, and red cubes need to be avoided and not jumped over, so you have to go around them. There is some good stuff as well, though. There are springboards, which will fling you forward at speed if you jump when moving over them, and they're quite handy because they, get a good boost if you can get one of them. In fact, the third level is just constant springboards, and you kind of learning where they are. It's quite a good level. Skateboards allow you to navigate over green squares without slowing down. If you jump on blue cans, it sees the timer stop for a few seconds, and if you jump on green cans, it will double your speed for a bit. So there you go. That's what you can do. So you can imagine the tracks get harder and harder as they progress. And with only one life, you can't fail, essentially. If you fail, it's game over. If you only got one life. It's going to be quite the challenge to complete all 24. So this is real arcade logic. This is challenging arcade logic. One life, you put your 10p in, how far can you get? So what it comes down to, it's something of a memory test in later levels, because essentially what this is, and we said it before about the other game that is very similar to this, it's Trailblazer and Cosmic Causeway. This is where they took their inspiration from, I think. Because if that 5-level track, if you spin that and do it in 3D, you've got Trailblazer. That's what you've got. It's the same thing, just seen from a different perspective. So as arcade conversions go, and we've spoke at length about terrible ones, I thought this was pretty decent. It moves at a decent pace. It's got a nice demo mode to show you what to do. The visuals are chunky, but they're well realised. Everything looks like what it says. It's got a consistent thematic visual style that works. It controls pretty well. And the only downside, really, is that the original game is not really that great when it came to it. It's all right. It's not a standout arcade game in and of itself. It's just okay. But as conversions go, this is all right. All that said, though, there is some fun to be had here. And if you want to get through to all 24 levels, and it's going to take some time and some skill and patience to learn them as you progress. I don't know if it warrants the £10 price tag. At the time, it's an arcade conversion, so they all came with that. Obviously, I had to pay for the license. But going back to it now, I'm not sure if I really played it. I might have had a couple of goes in it. I might have seen it in the arcade and had a crack on it. It's not something that I have much memory of, but it kind of, when I played it, I was like, I do kind of remember this. I thought this was a fun little diversion. And if it came out later as a budget title, you'd probably be pretty happy with spending a couple of quid on this. Because I can see this, if you bought this, you'd get some fun out of this. Because it's well made, it runs smoothly, it's not buggy, it looks okay, it sounds okay. It's a decent arcade conversion, which we don't see very many of. I quite enjoyed my time on Metrocross. I was expecting it to be crap, but I thought it was all right. Just not worth a tenner. 53%. I can kind of see that. It's an average game, but it's not terrible. And I don't know if that's damning with faint praise, but yeah, it was all right. What about you?
Yeah, it's a a bog standard kind of running game, proto Jetpack Joyride in some ways. I think. It's a kind of an endless side-scrolling runner and jumper. Reminded me of Fungus a little bit as well.
Yes,
there's a little bit of that in there, which is probably the arcade probably inspired all of those things at some level, really.
Yes.
It's not graphically great, but it's not terrible. Music was a bit annoying, but we've come across that before in these kind of arcade conversions. Very repetitive though, and hard. And I'm not sure that means it's going to be A, much fun, and B, at 10 quid, I don't know if it's value for money for that as well. I don't think you're getting enough game to warrant £10. But if this was a budget game, well, all day long this is budget, wouldn't it? You'd be much happier with that. So I don't think it has the variety and complexity to warrant full price. So it's sitting in the wrong price bracket, but it's a good conversion. It's a decent endless runner. If you like that kind of thing, you're going to have trouble getting through it. It's going to take you a while. But in these kind of side-scrolling, jump up and down the kind of screen games, I'd probably still go back to Shockwave Rider. I think that's a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. It's a little bit more about it. But I suppose the different kinds of game, one's more frantic speed, one's a bit more pace.
Yeah,
I don't know.
This is a dodgem game. I mean, it's like I said, it's Trailblazer in 2D. From the side
it is. But I think I would still probably go for Trailblazer if I'm going to do that kind of thing. But maybe, it's not terrible, is it? 53% is about right. The price is terrible though, and I think that's probably what's scuppered it here. It was all right, but it made me think that there's quite a lot of these side-scrolling games, and maybe they are. It put a jetpack on his back, and you wouldn't be far off Jetpack Joyride here, would you? Really? And everyone loved that. So maybe this is just, I don't know. Maybe there's something in it. It's just not quite all there. But either way, it's certainly better arcade conversion than Quartet by a million miles. So,
oh god, yeah, I'm a better arcade conversion than Quartet.
True, that's very true. Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, Metrocross is all right. Just a nice little diversion, but not at a tenner. No, not at a tenner. All right, our next one's a budget title though, so let's move into that. And well, completely unknown. This is the second one, isn't it? Second one by some people that we've already just talking about. Rasterscan, Graham.
Yes, Rasterscan from Binary Design, coded by Philip Alsop. That's the guy that did Hyperbole and Zub. Music's by Jason Brook, and the graphics here are simply credited to somebody called Lee, which I think might be Tony Lee, who's got numerous credits. But since I can't verify that 100%, I don't know. It could be Lee, could be Tony Lee, could be Bruce Lee for all the difference it makes, or Dairy Lee. His milky brother.
Or Rusty Lee.
Rusty Lee, yeah. Mary Lee, the happy version. We could go on like this for hours. We're not going to, though.
Geddy Lee.
Now, that would make sense. So you are on board the Rasterscan. That's a damaged ship currently falling into a nearby star, possibly more like falling into a black hole. But anyway, it's crashing. You control MSB, a robot that has seemingly forgotten everything except toaster repair. And I got the sense reading this description that they got bored anyway.
Yeah.
So you need to guide MSB around the ship, completing 4 main tasks. That's fix the generator, activate the engine, switch on the navigation, and guide the ship to safety using the said engine's navigation. The ship is secured by doors, and you need to solve the door lock puzzles to navigate around and get on with the tasks. Now, let me just refer you back to a conversation we had about games that have obtuse door locking puzzles to solve to progress. I'm looking at you, V. Now, I didn't like that for that stupid reason, and this is even more obtuse than that, I have to tell you. So, you control the MSB, which in this instance is a sphere with a rotating eye. And control is a interesting word. It's a word that could be applied to some things. I would argue that this game is more of a lack of control, because if you happen to accelerate, you're bouncing around this like a pinball machine. It's a little bit odd. So you control this rotating sprite. You're sort of navigating around with inertia-based controls. You can stop if you control the joystick, and it takes a good while to control and learn to control this, because you can accelerate really fast, slow down, and you need to get to grips with that those controls, as I say, otherwise you will be flying about, bouncing off all the different doors, walls, and just pinging around and not really knowing what to do. The main window of the game is you floating around and flipping between the screens, which aren't terribly badly drawn. The main sprites look quite nice. It actually looks quite nice and looks the part. You've got a mini-map at the bottom, which gives you indications of something or other, but the game is really obtuse. Now, in the Zapped review, they described the puzzles in this as really hard to figure out and solve, and because you need to basically unlock the doors in order to navigate through and find and fix the generator and activate the engines. And some of these puzzles are really obtuse. I found myself floating around, not really doing anything. I couldn't find really what I was meant to do. I saw these sort of things that looked like I should land in them, and I did press the button. It just made a kind of sound. Nothing happened. There was a display at the bottom which had, I think, a bomb. There was like a sort of 3 indicators of something, but it wasn't really clear what they were, nor are the instructions very clear about what they are. So I think I got kind of just a bit, I wasn't sure what I was doing. I ended up just floating around, bouncing off things and not really getting anywhere, not being able to die either, or seemingly being able to kill myself in order to restart and sort of try again and figure things out. The graphics, I said, seemed quite reasonable, and the backgrounds looked okay, but the controls, well, they're just a bit... I don't like these games with inertia-based controls. When you've got to navigate the nuances of things, and we had this with that space game that was set on the outside of another crashing spaceship in the last episode. When you're trying to navigate small, tight spaces or things... Yeah, shadow skimmer. And you're bumping into things, and when you bump into things, it pings you off things. And when and if you've got, add to that acceleration, and you've got something, and it's really hard to de-accelerate yourself. If you've got to maximum acceleration in this game and you're bouncing off things, it's really hard to try and control yourself, get back under control of your sprite. And eventually you're just going to be like, well, no, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm not creeping around this spaceship trying to fix things, which in essence, the game sounds like V. The way they've described it, you've got to creep around a spaceship trying to solve puzzles. That's V. But this is, V with a ball eye, an eyeball floating around inside it. It just makes very little graphical visual sense, and it lacks the compelling nature to be able to give you enough affordability to control it, because you can't do those things and you quickly get frustrated and think, well, what am I doing? What's the point of this? So I didn't really get any further than that with it, and because of that I felt like it was a bit of a miss for me anyway. I think there might be something in there for £2. It might be worth it. Got 67% in the review, and I think their criticism was it's just too obtuse, but if you can really get to grips with it and figure it out, maybe there's something there for you. I just didn't have the time and dedication and the wherewithal to sort of sit there and float around. I kept finding myself accelerating and pinging off things all the time, and it did my head in the end. Did you get anywhere in Rasterscan?
No. It's Lee Corley, by the way. He did the visuals. Lee Corley.
Oh, there we go.
So not surname, it's first name.
Not Bruce Lee.
So it's not Bruce Lee, no. Bruce Lee Corley. It's another budget title that originates from the mind of John Pickford, like Amaurote. So it's coming from the Pickfords again. And he did the concept for the Spectrum version, and obviously this has got programmed over onto the C64. I didn't really know what to make of this. It's like the opening stages of Whizball writ large. So it's like the opening stages of Whizball when you finally do get some control, but constantly having that inertia all the time with it. It's kind of a weird mix of all of it. So you're floating around a minimalist spaceship, trying to fix it with little help or guidance, and you're also not sure whether the edge of a screen is an exit or a wall, and it's just not a particularly enjoyable experience. The spin of the ball, the visuals are quite nice. The music's an okay constant as you battle in the walls and the controls, but it just all feels a little aimless. So at one point, I got out of the ship and couldn't get back in and found myself floating across screen after screen of space, which obviously is space, But as they note on their blog, no, you don't want that. As they note on their blog, I think Steve Pickford's written it was originally a visual style looking for a game, and it never really found one. Yeah, if I'm honest. So I think they have these ideas that like Amaurote, they've got these styles, but they're not getting the mechanics in first before they're coming up with these visual styles. And I think that's one of the weird things with this. It's a strange thing because they got I think they said they got a scanner or something, and they were scanning stuff in and making it look at all this weird stuff, and it didn't really work. No, I think this got 67% out of bewilderment rather than enjoyment. I don't really know what to make of it. 66% is 2/3, and it's like, well, there's 2/3 of a game here. The graphics are all right, the sound's all right, but there's no game. Let's just give it 2/3. So 67%. I didn't get on with this. I don't know. I found it a bit weird, just a bit weird and a bit uncontrollable and not particularly enjoyable.
I was looking for a game, and I'm not sure where I was going to find it. I was looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. There really wasn't much there. No. So Rasterscan. There we go. All right, let's get into our last one. Our last one for August 1987. And it's another sizable one. It's another arcade conversion. This is Slap Fight. A strange title. I don't understand the title, but whatever it is. So just when you thought this episode was not hard enough, you take this slap to the face with Slap Fight, which is another vertical scrolling arcade conversion from those people at Imagine. It's coded by John Megan. Now, he had previously done Arc Pandora and Short Circuit before this. He will go on to do lots of other things as well. It's got visuals by Mr. Imagine graphics artist himself, Steve Wahid, and music by Martin Galway. So this was originally released in the arcades by Taito, Potato, and developed by
Potato.
Potato, yes, and developed by Toaplan. The plot, such as it is, sees you defending the planet of Aurak, where mankind had shifted after their previous planet, Theon, had been taken over by evil aliens. Now, those same evil aliens have come to Aurak, and it's up to you to stop them. You do this by playing the role of an Alcon fighter pilot. Alcon stands for the Allied League of Cosmic Nations. And you fly an SW-475 space fighter craft to stop the invaders. There you go.
Yes.
That's your plot. So it's a vertically scrolling shmup with power-ups at the bottom that you can activate when you've picked up enough credits. It sits somewhere between Terra Cresta and Gradius Nemesis. And we've seen a lot of games that are taking their cues from those two games, I think, at this point in time. They seem to be influencing a lot. And it's probably not as popular as either of them. And that may be because the game, while solid, I don't really think it offers much new. But we'll come to that. So, like Terra Cresta, you fly upwards, but this has wave after wave of ground-based enemies predominantly, and not anything that you would consider airborne. I seem to read that. They essentially, when they designed the arcade, they wanted to fill it with loads of secrets, with different bits and bobs and things going on that you could find as the game progressed. And I think all those kind of secrets
that kind of makes sense, actually.
Yeah, but they kind of got missed out of the the home conversions, and it was a kind of a different type of thing. That was the ethos behind the design of the game, and that's kind of missing. So what you have here is a kind of ground-based. It's kind of like that other one we saw was Bulldog.
Yes,
so similar to this. So it's kind of Terra Cresta, but Bulldog. But although Terra Cresta had lots of ground-based stuff, there's no flying enemies in this. So the enemies in this, they follow the roads and the walkways on the floor, and it gives it a slightly different feel to something like Terra Cresta. So it's also different in the power-ups, which are more reminiscent of Nemesis. So whereas Terra Cresta, you upgrade the ship, don't you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, finally to the Fiery Phoenix. This is a more a Nemesis one. So shooting certain enemies, see them leave behind a star. Collecting these lights up options at the bottom, which going from left to right are speed up, shot, side, wing, bomb, laser, homing missile, and shield. Now, when you start, the second one, shot, is blank because that's your basic, shooting. That's your basic bullet shooting because that's your basic mode. But it becomes available if you get anything beyond that. So if you power up wing or bomb, then shot becomes available because you can then grab a couple of stars and go back to it if you don't like what you had. So it's kind of an odd thing because you'd think that the whole point is to everything you add bolts on, but this doesn't work like that. So it works slightly differently. So if you collect 1 star, you can speed up and so on and so forth. You collect 2 and then they move along. So if you played Nemesis or you've played Delta, those kind of things. So the more you collect, the more it moves along, and then you press the space bar and that basically activates whatever power up is highlighted at that point. And there you go. A lot of the variants also have multiple stages to them, so you can keep activating them to make them more powerful. So you can get multiple speed ups, you can have multiple I think wings and bombs, lasers. You can get multiple versions of them, so they sort of power up one on top of the other. Some of them have about 3 stages and things like that. And each power up substantially changes your ship. So whilst it makes it more powerful, it also makes it a bigger target. Essentially what happens when you activate one of these things, especially after side, stupid, but if you activate wing, bomb, laser, homing missile, your ship freezes and these other wings, these bolt-on parts sort of fly onto the screen and bolt onto your ship, and suddenly you're a much bigger ship. So kind of like you did in Terra Cresta, but I never managed to get more than one of them. I think if you activate the other one, then they fly off and you can only have one of those main ones going at any one time. And that's kind of how it works. So you've got to pick your sort of style of play that you might want. So bomb basically lands a bomb, kind of like Xevious, lands a bomb slightly in front of your ship. Laser, it fires an invisible laser basically up the screen and anything involved in it, because your bullets actually don't have much range on them, but the laser will fire all the way up. What's the other one? Homing missiles will fire 8 homing missiles in the cardinal directions and will home in on anything on screen, that sort of thing. So that's how these work. So because they make you a bigger target, although you are more powerful, it's a risk reward thing, because you're on a C64, so screen in real estate is you get quite big. It's easy to get shot. There's lots of bullets flying around. There are enemies coming on, and they'll shoot at you, and they're all dead shots. So they'll be aiming exactly where you are. So you've got to keep on the move. The levels end with a boss at certain points, but sometimes it's kind of weird. And sometimes the music changes, which I don't know if it was a little bit buggy. But if you get killed, sometimes the music changes when you get to different sections of the levels. But the landscape keeps going, like Terra Cresta, Black Hawk, Swiv later down the line, that kind of thing. So it's not like Light Force where you get a level and then it'll say, well done, you've completed that level and you're on to the next. It just keeps moving up and just keeps progressing and changing as you go through it. The visuals are what you would expect. They're a little chunky, but they're colourful. And I thought the sprite designs were close enough to the arcades to be recognisable. It's not terrible. Steve Woodhead's done his Terra Cresta. It looks a bit like Terra Cresta to me. So the movement is smooth. The game it scrolls nicely. It feels responsive, especially as you get more speed ups under your belt and you start whipping around the screen quite quick. It's a solid shooter, this is, on the C64. Not one I'd really played much of. I don't know if it's because I just had my fill of Terra Cresta and I was kind of a bit vertical scrolling shooted out by this point, maybe. But maybe I was just looking for something else. But the problem is, it just feels like we've done this all before. And on top of that, it's really difficult. Really difficult. It does that thing where if you die, you lose all your power-ups. And what it doesn't do is that it doesn't then give you the option just to quickly grab them back. The only way you can do that is if you had one in the chamber. So if you collected some stars but you hadn't activated it, then when you come back, speed is highlighted. So you can grab a speed up, but you're then at the mercy because it's certain enemies that have the stars underneath them. So you kind of have to learn which ones to shoot to get the power up sort of, currency, which is a bit weird. You kind of think they were random or whatever. But the problem is that once you die, if you die mid-level, you're going to be screwed unless you've got a speed up, because you're just not going to be able to deal with what's coming at you because you won't be fast enough and things like that. So your base speed is just not fast enough to deal with all the multiple craft of bullets. So in a way, the fact that it does not put you back to the start, as some games do, which we've moaned about, but that's almost a hindrance here. You're just not powerful enough to survive once you die. And that's a bit of a shame, really, because this is a really solid blaster that works just as you want it to. There's no bugs, not that I came across. It's solid. It doesn't have that flickeriness that we saw in Hades Nebula. And it all works. It should. It looks fine. It moves well. The music, though, is nothing to write home about. And it's actually quite annoying. Bar a couple of jingles that you probably recognize from our podcast that I recognize as they played. I was like, I recognize that. And some of them I don't know. It's always a nice surprise see what you've used, and you've used a couple in here. But the main tune is weirdly jaunty and off, and the sound effects they're excruciating. If you thought the Max Talk sound effects were bad, they do have the option in this by pressing the spacebar to play with sound effects only, which don't ever do ever. Not if you value your eardrums. You can do music and sound effects because the music only takes up 2 channels, so it doesn't take a thing. Or you can just play with music. Just play with the music. It's not brilliant, but it's the best way to enjoy this game. It's kind of easy to see why this release may have been forgotten, as it sits in a strange middle ground between 2 much more well-known shooters, like Terra Cresta and Nemesis. I think both of those are much more well-known than Slapfight is. And the problem is it's not actually any better than either of them. In fact, it's not as, it's very good. I do like it. It'll offer you a challenge, that's for sure. But I think some of the odd quirks, like Side and Bomb being absolutely rubbish. Some of the power-ups are crap. They're just rubbish. You activate it and you're like, yeah. And then you're like, oh, I'm actually worse. This isn't a power. This is a power down. And the fact that your bullets don't reach all the way up the screen, which is a bugbear of mine in shoot 'em ups. My bullets should go all the way to the top of the screen. That's just annoying that they don't. And the fact that it takes ages. This was a little thing. It takes ages for the high score ditty to end. It does. To let you move on. You have to sit there and just listen to it, and you're like, it's not even a particularly good high score ditty. Which is, all these little things kind of build up over time. It's a solid shooter, but it's a victim of being in the shadow of better games by now. So it got 80%, which I think is about right, taken in and of itself. And I think if this had come out like a year or so previous, maybe this would have got higher. But as we've had, I think, better shooters now on the 64, and this is good. But even things like, Fire Track, which I think I preferred as well. This is an okay game that's just a bit overwhelmed in that market. It's at the top end, but I think looking at other arcade conversions, it's not as good. Just down to some of its strange little quirks. What about you? Did you enjoy your slapping and fighting?
Funny enough, I played quite a lot of this back in the day. No idea why. It's an underwhelming arcade conversion, and that's the tragedy of this. Now, the arcade is not anything that anyone's going to, sing high praises of, because it's not one that really people remember, I don't think, that well. And in the C64 canon, it's another top-down shooter, of which there seems to be loads now. There was a short time ago we was asking for more shooters. Now we've got dozens of the damn things.
Yeah.
But the trouble with this is it does have a number of weird issues, principally the fact that it's nearly impossible, which I think it struggles with that. I think had they just given you a little bit more chance, this would have been really great. it does have nice features like the multi-weapons. The graphics are bulky, but they're quite good. And the backgrounds are quite nice. And the enemies, although they're not really varied, they are quite hard. And there is those weird homing bullets which drive you insane because they always seem to get you. So there's a challenge in there. But it's the upgrades that don't feel like upgrades, the downgrades. So when you get to when you've collected enough stars to get to some of the upgrades, it doesn't feel like you're upgrading anything. It actually feels like you're less capable. And then when you die, inevitably die, you then are less capable. So these games have a horrible tendency, or this game in particular has a horrible tendency to essentially cripple your spaceship at a time when you don't need to be crippled. And so if you die, unless you are really lucky and happen to just manage to quickly upgrade, which again, the upgrades don't necessarily always help you, because even the first stage of some of the upgrades aren't upgraded enough to give you an advantage. Like the homing missiles, when you get the first batch, it doesn't really seem to fire that many of them, and the firing ratio seems to slow down the more upgraded you become. So you actually get bigger and slower. It's just it's a little bit odd. It's like the triple bullet thing. You get, if you get you can shoot and you get like 3 layers of bullets, but they're all just shooting in the same straight line halfway up the screen. It doesn't really help you, and that's my problem with some of the upgrades, is that they don't really feel like upgrades. In fact, like you rightly point out, they're really downgrades. And so it's got the kind of the speed, it's got the kind of look and feel. It's just a bit of a snooze, and it's a snooze for the wrong reasons. It's a snooze because you're probably never going to get that far in this because it's really hard. And it's not what you call a perfect facsimile of an arcade, but it's got all of the essential bits in there, including the weird discordant sound, as you say, that give it that kind of close to the arcade in terms of the way it plays and everything else. And if the arcade is the same upgrade tree and the same problems, which I suspect it probably is, then they've done a really good conversion. It's so good, in fact, that they've converted the worst things of the arcade into this version as well, which I suspect is what's happened here. Zapped raved about this. I mean, their review was full of hyperbole about how it matched the arcade at last and all of this lot. And I'm thinking, well, maybe at the time, back in 1987, maybe Slapfight was better known in certain areas than others. I never came across this in the arcades, and we lived basically near an arcade. So I don't remember coming across it a lot. And I don't remember seeing this in the arcade club when we've been a couple of times. So I don't remember seeing it in there either. So I might have, but I don't remember it. But I did play this a lot. This was actually out of Terra Cresta and Slapfight. I played more Slapfight than I played Terra Cresta. So it must have had something about it back then. And I guess maybe if it fulfilled my need for a top-down shooter, perhaps I didn't have Terra Cresta. I think if someone gave you 5 top-down shooters to play, you might settle on Slapfight with it being a decent arcade conversion and having the upgrade trees and the spaceship bolting on and some of the nice animations that it has. More so than perhaps Terra Cresta does in that respect. I don't know. I still prefer side-scrolling shooters to top-down scrolling. I always have, although I say that with Ikaruga around the world, that's a slightly different thing. But I still, in terms of 8-bit and 16-bit machines, I still quite like mostly side-scrollers shooters, with the exception of the occasional odd one, like Swiv, as you say, or there's a couple on the Amiga that stand out. There's another one I can't for life of me remember what it is now, but it's the one with the Bomb the Bass soundtrack on it. It will come back to me, whatever.
Oh, Xenon 2.
Xenon 2 and stuff like that. So there are, crazy good side-scrollers and stuff like that. This is in that kind of pantheon of good conversions, as you rightly point out. I think the problem is it's converted the worst parts of the arcade as well, which makes this game perhaps too hard, too difficult, and unforgiving in these games. When they're unforgiving in the arcades, they are truly unforgiving. I mean, this isn't even a bullet hell game. So later down the line, when you get the bullet hell games, they're even worse for torturing you to death. But there is that kind of instant replayability. This does seem to have it. I'm just not quite sure it's got all of it. So it's just a bit underwhelming, I think, in terms of the way it plays, but I'd still take it over some of the other crap we've played. So 80%, I'd agree with you. I think that's pretty much bang on for this. So, because if it had better go-away music, that might have been pushed towards the 90s, but it doesn't. So
it would. What's the crime of this is that Terra Cresta only got 60 odd.
I think it's better than Terra Cresta. This, I think it's a lot better than that.
I don't.
But I think it's where you come at it. I mean, I think I played more Slapfight, so I think I've just got more of an affinity. Where you probably played more Terra Cresta. Terra Cresta has better music, so Terra Cresta should probably have scored higher than it did. Which, in all fairness, that is arguably a terrible score for that game. So maybe really Terra Cresta should probably have been about the same as this, probably about the 80 mark, maybe. But out of preference, I prefer Slapfight, but that's like comparing apples and apples with green apples and red apples. It's an apple at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're just that's what I mean. To me, this is it's just a bit too similar. It's like trying to bolt Nemesis onto Terra Cresta for some reason, and then not quite understanding, and then either whatever they were trying with the arcade is missing. I don't know.
I bet underneath it all, it's probably probably built on that Nemesis engine, maybe.
I don't think it is because completely different developers. This was
They've obviously looked at those little
potato
graphics and gone for the exact same look and feel.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it didn't actually do that much in business. Not many arcade boards were produced for it in Japan. I think it's a bit of a niche title. It's just a niche one. It's a strange one. But it's okay. It's not terrible. But it's just hard and some strange decisions that just kind of build up over time. Like, I want to get back into it quicker. Stop playing that bloody high score tune.
Yeah, but it's better. So let's say, for example, it's better and £1 cheaper than Hades Nebula. There's loads of these top-down average. This is at least better than top-down average. And it's certainly in the better league of those. So, like you say, but odd. And as you rightly point out, it's inherited weirdness. And I think that's the real kicker here.
Yeah, there you go. Slap Fight. Strange name as well. I couldn't find out where that name came from.
It's probably a literal translation, or like, what was that arcade game that famously was translated incorrectly, and then it ended up being on all the cabinets? And there's a famous driving game. I think there's a famous driving game that came out, and it was. They actually got the name of the arcade translated incorrectly. So when it was translated, it on all these big arcades. I'll have to try and find out what it was. But everyone looked at it going, well, that seems like a weird name for that. And it actually was incorrect all along. So I can't remember what it was. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, yeah, Slap Fight, strange name. Nothing on the wiki I could spot or anything that I could find. If anyone knows where the name comes from, then of course let us know, because I'm curious to know where that name comes, because it doesn't fit, that game at all. But hey, it sounds more like something to do with the hockey game.
Yes, it does.
Because that's Slapshot, I guess.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we go. That's it. We are done. What have we looked at in this episode? Well, we looked at Head Over Heels, which we liked. Clever design. We looked at Quartet, which we did not like. Not at all. We looked at Challenge of the Gobots, which again we did not like. Hades Nebula, which was averagely annoying. Max Talk, stupid. Oink, which was clever and would recommend. Amaurote, which is a visual style.
Spider egg. Spider egg.
Does whatever a spider egg can do, which turns out to be very little apart from throw bombs. Wander
around, throw bombs at things. And that's all I can do because I'm a spider egg.
Because I've got bendy knees. Look out.
I'm a well-animated spider egg.
Metrocross. Rasterscan. Oh no, Slap Fight, it'll work. Anyway, Metrocross, we looked at that, which was a very decent arcade conversion of a not particularly great arcade original. Rasterscan, another picture game where they were looking for something to put the graphics around. And finally, Slap Fight, which was, weird, strange shoot 'em up, but enjoyable, hard, but weird, odd. There you go. That's our games. There's no crap verts, so I'm going to go straight into just to say there was another game that was featured in this, but we've looked at it. It was Revs Plus.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah,
and we kind of covered that when we did the Revs review many moons ago. So there was no point in going over the same thing again. It was just like we'd say the same things again. Like, no, which was we didn't like it.
No, we didn't.
So there you go. Revs Plus was reviewed, but we didn't look at it because we've already done that. So go back to whenever we looked at that before. When did we look at that? It must have been like episode 10 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah,
wasn't it 1985?
Like something like that, yeah.
Years ago. Feels like another age.
Jeff Crammond, that game.
Yes. And he crammed a lot into the 64 with the Revs Plus, yes.
Too much, one might say. It's too much perspective on that game.
Too much, yeah. Absolutely. It's like
a raga version.
Yeah, it's like in the wild, Revs eats bread.
Oh dear.
Right, we've got the chart though. This is from Commodore user as per normal. So at number 10, a new entry of Kickstart 2. Down to number 9 is Football Manager. Why is that still stinking up the chart, for God's sake? It's because it's the summer months, isn't it? It's the summer months. People have been playing it over the summer months because there's no footy back then.
Yeah.
Because, back then, football started in September, ended in May. May 10th, FA Cup final, it was all done.
Yeah.
Good Lord. We've got 2 number 9s. So at number 9 as well is the Executive Leaderboard.
That's weird.
World-class
leaderboard. Oh, no. Who knows?
Who knows? Well, it's probably not hit the charts yet. Number 7, we have 4 great games. I don't know what they are. Number 6, BMX Simulator. Number 5, a new entry with the Eyeball. Number 4, new entry with Whizball. All the balls there.
That's it.
The teabagging at 4 and 5. Number 3, we have the Milk Race.
Goodness me.
I know. You never want the milk race after the balls.
No, you don't.
Number 2, Barbarian. That's new in at number 2. And then new in at number 1 is Last Ninja. Of course it is.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Yeah, that's it. Anything else into number 11, Gunship? Army Moves at number 12. Six Pack at number 13. Enduro Racer down from number 1 to number 14.
Oh, well, thank God.
Yeah. Micro Rhythm down to 15. Park Patrol, Ollie and Lissa, Crazy Coaster, Olympic Spectacular.
God, we're surely going to come across that at some point.
I don't know, maybe. And then LA SWAT. So there you go.
Okay.
That's it. Just to sort of say what we got coming up next. In our next one, it'll be a double episoder. There's not that many games we've got. So what we've got, I think Auto Duel is I think that's a strategy one. We've got California Games.
Okay.
Biggie,
Epic
Convoy Raider, Death Wish 3,
Oh, Lord.
Deceptor, Denarius.
Set our ethics to stun for that one.
What, Death Wish 3?
With Death Wish 3, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that one. Exelon, Game Over.
Okay.
Kickstart 2. Mr. Weems. Now, the full title of that is Mr. Weems and there's something like The Fabulous Mr. Weems and the She-Vampires.
Okay.
That's the full title of that, I think.
Right.
Mysteries of Nile,
Uh-huh.
Pirates, Realm.
Oh, it's a thingy, isn't it? Pirates. That's
Sid Meier, isn't it? Yeah. Realm,
Okay.
Rebel, Rebounder,
Ooh, good music for Rebounder.
Roadrunner,
Okay. Weird music for that.
Snapdragon, Star Paws, Street
Hey.
Sports Baseball, Begone, Dusty Moore, and welcome in Slim Tim Dalton for the Living Daylights.
Oh, God.
Thunderbolt, Transatlantic Balloon Challenge.
Oh, no.
It's finally here. It took so long to come because it's been delivered by balloon. It got blown off course.
It's developed by a balloon, I think, that.
And finally, Synapse. So
Okay.
it'll be a double episode of that one. We've got plenty of games to look at. I think it's 22, I think.
Yeah, some good ones in there, though, isn't there? Dotted in there.
Some interesting ones,
some
yeah.
curios. Game Over's a curio, because that's got a really weird soundtrack, really weird samples in that soundtrack, as I recall, from Matt
Yeah.
Galway. One of the first where we did that, I think.
And obviously another gold medal with California Games.
Yes. Well, California Games. Well, it would be interesting to go back to that after all this time.
Yeah, true. But there you go. So that's what we've got coming up. We've said our Patreon stuff at the beginning, so I'm not going to repeat that now. I think that's it. I think we're done. That was a long month of games.
It was.
3 episodes. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be getting into September next week. And we hope to hear, we hope you will join us along the way. So I think on that note, we should finish, unless you've got anything you wish to add.
No. I think the only thing to add is it's interesting that we're now rapidly approaching towards the end quarter of 1987, which means inevitably at the end of that, we're going to have our golden bread bins. It's going to be a tough thing because we've played hundreds of games for that. So, and I think, as you pointed out earlier, I think there's going to have to be an arcade conversion or an arcade catastrophe award. And I think so. I think that's a really good idea. I think we'll have to do that.
Yeah, Cacade. Cacade conversions.
The Cacade Conversion Award, yeah.
Yeah, something like
Absolutely.
that. I'm sure we'll come up with something. But yeah, I think it needs to be because there's just been so many of them.
Yeah.
And I think they need to be rewarded for their terribleness. They need to be called out. But there you go. So on that note, I've been Adrian Mills.
I have been Graham Ruddings.
And you have been listening to Spider Egg. And we hope to see you again next week. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Zapped to the Past podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Commodore 64 games, as well as the music, films and TV from around the 1980s, driven, of course, by the issue of Zap 64 magazine published at that time. We will return with a whole new batch of games and stuff to talk about next week. Until then, if you want to listen to or download previous episodes of Zapped to the Past, and why wouldn't you, they can all be found on our website at zappedtothepast.com, as well as being available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, pretty much anywhere where we can upload them. By the way, we do always love to hear from our amazing listeners, so if you'd like to contact us about anything in the podcast or beyond, you can do so by emailing us at zappedtothepast@gmail.com. We're also active on Twitter under @ZapTother, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and most social media platforms. Just search for Zap to the Past and you'll find us. Oh, and if you like the podcast and what we're doing, please do like, share, review, rate us. It really helps. Something, apparently. The Zapped of the Past podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 Studio. All opinions expressed are those of the writers, and while we indeed love Zap64 magazine, the Zapped of the Past podcast is not affiliated with it in any way. Stay safe, see you next time, and remember, we play these games so you don't have to.